Hello my friends. Now this little video here is basically for my followers who are going to ultimate lengths to help me create what I'm trying to create on this platform and other platforms and with Sid's Ventures in general. So basically what this is I've strung all of the videos from our trip around Australia together into one file. So it's, I don't think you'd actually probably want to sit down and watch 3 hours of me give, 1 minute talks. Maybe you do, but this is basically up there so that the supporters out there who want to see me monetize YouTube can kind of let this run so that I can get my hours up to 400 hours so that I can actually start monetizing YouTube. Yeah, so there's nothing before the start of that trip. So from January up until June, I shot a whole bunch of other videos as well. They're not included in this. This is just the trip, basically leaving from Geelong and then coming all the way back to Geelong, 26,000 kilometers and 6 months later. Yeah, so this is up there for that purpose. Big love to you all. There are so many things happening at the moment in terms of what I've done with the website, what I've done with Patreon, what I'm filming for YouTube content. Ultimately, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be breaking down my videos and having Patreon as the main platform. So, for example, if I have 100% of a video on Patreon, I'll probably edit that down to about 40%, put it on YouTube, and then I'll take like a couple of little bits out of that and I'll put them on Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, and I booked my ticket for Tassie today, so we are off to Tassie on the 2nd of Feb 2022. Oh yeah. So yeah, here's 3 hours of me traveling around Australia. Big love. So I'd like to tell you a little story about my time on TikTok over the last 4 months, if I may. So my name is Sid. I've been working as a professional tour guide in Australia for the last 10 years. Late last year, I decided the industry was shot and I needed to do something else. So I decided to bring my tours online. January 18th, I joined TikTok. About a week later, I made a video inviting you guys to join me on my tours, and the response was crazy. A lot of people jumped on very, very quickly. So I went out and started making little mini documentaries around Victoria and Australia, and I quickly realized that everyone shared the same enthusiasm and passion for the mission as I had. So I decided I was going to focus 100% on making digital content for you guys. So I changed my whole life. I decided I was going to move into the forest for a couple of months, hone my craft, get more of a follower base, and then take you all on a guided 6-month motorbike trip around Australia. But the day I moved into the forest, the motorbike got stolen. A whole bunch of my followers were kind and generous enough to throw in money to try to replace the motorbike. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. I had to go back to work. Went up to the desert to work for 5 weeks to try to make money to replace the motorbike. Fortunately, the motorbike was recovered in that process, but it had a lot of damages to it. So I've just finished my 5 weeks in the desert. I've come back to my hometown. The motorbike is taking almost 3 weeks to get repaired. That's the extent of the damages. But once that bike is repaired, it's a couple of months late, but I'm taking you on that 6-month journey around Australia. So you're basically going to have me taking you on a personalized tour around the country and show you the best parts of the natural world and science and culture and education and adventure and fun. Yeah. So if you're one of my followers, that's a quick recap of the story so far. If you don't know my face, that's the story. Feel free to jump on board because it's going to get quite exciting pretty soon. And if you want more information, click the link to my website because all of the info regarding the itinerary and what is actually happening under the surface of Sid's Ventures is all up there. Yeah, cool. All right. Boo. And welcome to the Blue Mountains. The Greater Blue Mountains area is over 2.5 million acres in size and located only 50 kilometres west of Sydney. It's listed as Australia's 14th World Heritage Site in 2000. The area crossed 6 Aboriginal language groups and has been occupied by humans for over 22,000 years. Base rocks are about 470 million years old, and the park contains over 1,000 slot canyons, including one that is longer and wider than the Grand Canyon. The Genolan karst system is incredible, and it was the first series of caves in the world to be protected back in 1872. On average, over 5 million people visit the park every single year to visit the sites and make use of the 250 kilometres of walking tracks throughout the park. And about 150 of those people get lost. The World Heritage listing is in recognition of its significant natural values. It possesses unique plants and animals that relate an extraordinary story of the evolution of Australia's distinctive eucalypt vegetation. The park contains 100 species of eucalypt, as well as 150 plant species that are found nowhere else on the planet. Whew. So that was the Blue Mountains, and I think I have frostbite. See you next time. Somewhere out here is a patch of forest that is kept so secret that no one is allowed to know where it is. It's like the Area 51 of the forestry world. So there is a tree out here called the Wollemi pine that is so rare, they actually thought it was extinct for 30 million years until quite recently. So I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing else like this in any other capital city on the planet. So just through the trees we have the city of Sydney, and what I'm standing on is the most extensive rock art engraving site in the metropolitan area. Many thousands of Aboriginal rock art sites are found in the Sydney region, and hundreds of these are found within the city limits themselves. Many have been well documented and are well known, but most of them aren't publicised to ensure they last as long as possible. This particular site at Daintree Bay is definitely kept no secret. It's on Engravings Road, but this is the most extensive rock art or petroglyph site in the Sydney region. So ranging from images that are just a few centimetres to engravings that are metres in size. And these images generally depict land animals, sea animals, tools, weapons, shields, people, footprints. So many of these petroglyphs have been dated to between 5,000 to 7,000 years, but radiocarbon dating suggests human activity in the city area for over 30,000 years. And being carved into soft sandstone, it's only a matter of time before all of these pictures are lost to the elements. And these ones are new. So this is Burning Mountain. So this is the oldest burning fire on the planet. It's actually a burning coal seam that's about 30 meters below the Earth's surface, and this fire has been burning for about 5,500 years. So the estimate is that it's continuously burning and traveling south at about 1 meter per year. So back in the early 1800s, when the first Europeans came out here, they thought it was a volcano, but they were obviously mistaken. And for the local Indigenous group, the Kununurra people, this place is connected to a story that relates to Biame, the creator. So the story goes there was a local woman whose husband went off into battle, and her husband never came back. Everyone else's husband did. So she was so heartbroken when her husband didn't come back from war that she went to Biame, the creator, and she asked for him to kill her. So Biame refused to kill her, but he said that he would turn her into stone. As she was being turned into stone, she began to cry, and her tears turned into smoke. So for the local Kununurra people, this place here is a teaching about the extent that people will go to when they fall in love with someone and when that love is taken away. So this place represents the depths of love and heartbreak and commitment. So stories like this are entwined and written through the entire landscape of this entire country. And if you understand these stories and you can read the lessons from them, it's not just a landscape, it's not just a burning coal seam, it's a lesson about life and love. It's beautiful. Welcome to Biame's cave. He was the creation being who created everything that we see in this particular area. Traditionally speaking, this was what we call a bora. This was a sacred site for the Indigenous men of the area. So this is one of the most sacred sites on the east coast of Australia. For about 7 different language groups on the central coast, this was the epicenter for the creation being Biame. So these 7 lines underneath Biame's arms, apparently they're feathers and they represent the different language groups connected to Biame. After passing on his teachings here, when he got up and left, it was his movements leaving this area that resulted in a lot of the hills being flattened, because that's the track that Biame took. So I'd heard from a number of people that the vibe here was quite profound, and they were absolutely right. This is quite an amazing place to be. So I've got a lot of followers from Tennessee. Now I just wanted to show you this place because this is basically our answer to Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to Tamworth. So this place is home to the Tamworth Country Music Festival. It's been running since 1972, and a plethora of country music legends from all over the world have played here, including some of our biggest exports like Keith Urban, Casey Chambers and Lee Kernaghan, as well as the more locally known legends like Slim Dusty, Smokey Dawson, and my personal favourite, John Williamson. But that's Tamworth. It's our country music capital of Australia. Have you seen Jurassic Park? This is basically a Jurassic forest. I'm not sure if you know what a UNESCO World Heritage Site is, but this is the 4th one I've taken you to. So welcome to the Gondwana forests of Australia. Let's go for a walk. So this is actually a collective of a grouping of different forests going from Newcastle all the way up to Brisbane on the east coast of Australia. These Gondwana forests have been about 180 million years in the making since Gondwana broke up. So New Caledonia, Australia, Chile, Argentina, all of these countries have the remnants of these Gondwana forests left in them, and Australia has the most extensive array of these forests. The reason they're World Heritage listed, they actually filled 3 different criterion. One for ongoing geological processes, one for the outstanding examples of the Earth's evolutionary history, and one for the remnants of the ecological environment found in these forests. Most of this kind of forest was covering that supercontinent. So this is World Heritage number 3. The next one will be Fraser Island. After that, the Great Barrier Reef. And after that, the tropical rainforests of far north Queensland. So if you are enjoying these tours... Whoa, what is that? What kind of plant is this? As I was saying, until I can monetize this and get sponsorship, every dollar is going towards food and fuel so that I can keep this tour online and we can get right around the country together. All right. Ignore the prawn. Tomorrow we're heading into Queensland. This is where all the killer plants, killer birds, killer animals, killer jellyfish, killer everything is. So for those of you that have been missing the deadly animal content, it is on the way. Queenslanders, I need you to let me know what the most amazing and unique and interesting parts of your state are. I've got a good idea about a few things, and if anyone knows how I can get to Fraser Island or onto the Great Barrier Reef, so I've got about 3 or 4 weeks in your state starting tomorrow. Oh yeah. The last 3 weeks of my trip in 30 seconds. Ready? So we left Melbourne 3 weeks ago, caught up with a friend in Albury, caught up with Cuzzy Bra in Wagga, froze my ass off, got to Sydney, got a severe tooth infection and spent the week in bed. Managed to film some stuff, managed to get out of there before the lockdown, went inland, filmed some stuff, froze my ass off, dropped down to the coast, filmed some stuff, started to warm up. Oh, look at that. Got my green pass down to Queensland, heading towards these things, places like this and this. And when it gets warm, I'm gonna slow the whole thing down a bit. And let me know if there's anything in particular that you wanna see while we're in Queensland. A bunch of people from TikTok and from my old tours as well threw in money to help me to get my motorbike replaced or fixed. I've put all 42 names on my bike, so you are all riding with me constantly. So once again, thank you all very much. And a shout out to everyone that's been chucking money into the PayPal and into the Patreon. That is all going towards funding this trip. Woo. Newsflash, welcome to Nimbin. So most Australians will understand the reputation that Nimbin has and how it relates to the local interest in horticulture, excessively expressed through the Mardi Gras festival. So there is a lot more to Nimbin and to the surrounding communities than just this love for a particular plant. These guys were actually single-handedly responsible for the first ever rainforest to be protected from logging back in the late 1970s. So these local communities, they went out of their way to step in and stop the logging of what would eventually become Nightcap National Park. In time, it would become a protected UNESCO World Heritage rainforest. So their love of plants is quite obvious, but not many people understand how deep their love actually goes. Now, how would you like to go camping with your very own personal SAS survival technician who can take you through everything you need to know about actually living in the bush? Well, that's what I did for the last couple of days with a legend called Rick J. Peterson. Let me tell you what he taught me. So this is Rick. So I went out with Rick to an undisclosed location and he basically ran through everything regarding water, shelter, fire, food and rescue communication. We ran through making shelters, knots, rope work, creating tools, creating traps, setting off traps, treating water, using weapons, finding the right weapons, avoiding landmines, foraging for food, cooking that food, navigation, rescue communications, finding what we needed for fire, creating that fire, using that fire, survival kits and everything you need in them, and of course, protection from potential dangers. You name it, and we went through it. If you're into survival skills, go and check out Rick's page, because that is jam-packed full of really interesting and useful information regarding how to survive out in the bush. So if you're into survival tips, jump on with Rick. If you're into adventures and a bit of information about the natural world, jump on with me. Or both. Yeah, both. Probably a good idea. If you took a volcano and you froze it in time, and then you peeled away the outside of that volcano and you were left just with the magma in the middle, you would be getting something like this. This is a part of a series of hills that we call the Glasshouse Mountains near Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. And all of these rocky pillars through the area are remnants of volcanic activity coming through this area about 25 million years ago. A few months ago, I did another video about volcanic activity down in Victoria. The same hotspot that was responsible for that activity in Victoria is exactly what came through this part of Queensland. So as Australia has been moving north, that hotspot has stayed still, and that went all the way down the east coast of Australia. Fascinating stuff. Through mid-Queensland down into Victoria, this is by far the youngest part of the continent. Every landscape on planet Earth tells a story. If you don't know the story about the area that you're from, I highly suggest you look into it to learn that story and to gain appreciation about the landscape and the history of the Earth itself. If you do find anything interesting about what you've learnt, let me know. It's unfortunate that there is a good chance that you think rocks are boring. Take a book off a shelf and you look at that book without opening the pages and reading it. It is just a boring, inanimate object that has not much to do or tell you. But once you open it up and you start reading those chapters, there is a story there that could possibly captivate you and educate you and give you a deeper understanding about life itself. Same thing goes for these guys. Rocks aren't boring. Mycelium, that's not boring either, but that's a different story. Geology Talk begins. Paperbark. This is one of the coolest trees in Australia, if not the world. This is the paperbark, or the tea tree melaleuca. So the bark itself had many, many different uses, from making shelters, to making bedding, to use as a carrying bowl, even used for cooking. If you soak the bark in water and then wrap a fish around it, you can put it in the coals, and even used for first aid to bandage wounds. But the thing this tree is most famous for is the oil. So tea tree oil comes from the tea tree melaleuca. And this is one of the most powerful natural antiseptics and widely bought antiseptics around the planet. Very cool stuff. Paperbark. This is probably Australia's most famous lake. This is Lake Mackenzie on Fraser Island. Now, two of the things that make this lake so famous are the bright white sands and the clear water. But not many people understand that those two factors mean that there is basically no life in this lake at all. When sand arrives on Fraser Island on the east coast, it contains 2 to 3% mineral, giving it a bit of a yellow colour. By the time the sand works its way across the island, all of those minerals have been absorbed into the environment, which means we are basically left with pure white silica. And the lake itself has a high aluminium content, which means that it keeps it sterile, but it also means that almost nothing can actually live in this lake. So what does Fraser Island and Egypt have in common? These guys just here. So this is called a satine, also known as a Fraser Island turpentine. These trees are so resistant underwater, they were actually taken from Fraser Island all the way to Egypt and used to build the Suez Canal. Crazy. So this is the only rainforest in the world that actually grows in sand. So the trees basically get nutrients from each other, and they get their water from the 4 trillion litres of water that is trapped inside Fraser Island. Crazy. There's 20,000 acres of this stuff here. Dingo's got my sandwich. Australia is famous for their dingoes. Now, these dingoes originally came from Indonesia about 5,000 years ago. On the mainland, they've mixed a lot with wild dogs and community dogs. Out here on Fraser Island, it is pretty much a pure breed of dingo. And because these packs have been separated from the mainland, they've developed their own community standards, so to speak. So there's been a few problems over the years with people feeding the dingoes, and the dingoes getting a little bit too close. So these guys are considered to be dangerous. There's been a number of attacks over the years, which is why dingo sticks are on hand, which is why most of the residential areas are protected by these electrical grids. Unfortunately, a young boy was attacked and killed about 10 years ago, which resulted in a large number of the local dingo population being culled. So nobody wins in that story. This forest was the training ground for one of the most secret and elite commando groups on the planet. Back in 1942, they formed what was called Z Special Unit. So about 900 men camped on the island here. They trained up in jungle and amphibious combat to go and perform secret operations in the Second World War on the Pacific Islands. So it wasn't just Australians, New Zealanders, Filipinos, Singaporeans, Malays, Chinese, French, Dutch, English, and they ended up running about 260 operations. Some of them became the most famous, and some of them are still kept classified. This is a strangler fig. All the stuff you see on the outside is the strangling fig, and what you see in the middle, that is the actual tree. This guy basically goes up into the tree and sends all these roots down, smothers the tree, and then it sends a huge root down and basically starts living off that tree until this guy in the middle completely disappears. How cool is that? This is the biggest sand island on planet Earth. And it is paradise. It's literally known as paradise. Kakadu, also known as Fraser Island. This is the 5th UNESCO World Heritage Site we've been to together, and this may very well be my favourite one in the country. So Fraser Island's made the list for its biology, its geology, and its natural beauty. You can find just about every environment on this island, and there is so much to talk about that I've actually spread it across about 10 different videos. Those covering plants, animals, history, geology. So stay tuned for the Fraser Island series, and if you're not on board already, follow for more adventures. They say this is the most dangerous beach on the planet. Yeah. But seriously, if you do make it out of the bushes past the dingoes, if you do make it over the beach past the traffic, and you manage to skip over the snakes and actually get into the water, if you're lucky enough to get past the sharks, eventually you will hit the East Australian current and get sucked down to Antarctica. But apart from all that, it seems pretty safe. Yeah.
Fine. I'll be fine.
So if you've enjoyed this series on Fraser Island, don't thank me totally, thank the guys here at Bush Camp Retreat and Kakadu Adventures. If it wasn't for their generosity, I would have not been able to get on the island. So if you ever are on Fraser, make sure you stay with these guys. They are literally right on the beachfront. And if you're ever doing a tour on Fraser, these are the only guys you should be traveling with. And a big thanks to you who have been supporting me and basically covering my petrol and my food for the last couple of weeks. So the bulk of this tour at the moment is founded on people's generosity and kindness. So thank you, and thanks to the guys here at Beach Camp and Kakadu Adventures, because without them and you, none of this would be possible at the moment. Big love. I have so much love for my rock nerd friends out there. I'm going to explain to you as briefly as I can how Fraser Island was formed. So this is the east coast of Australia. This is Queensland and this is New South Wales. At the northern end of New South Wales, we have the tablelands. As rain hits these mountains, it washes out into rivers to the coast, and then all of that sediment is brought up the coast like this. So this sand was quite happily just drifting up the coast, and eventually it ran into 3 volcanic rocks, and that sand hit those rocks and began to build up, and it built up, and it built up, and it built up, and eventually a huge sand island was formed, and that would eventually become Fraser Island, all due to the 3 volcanic rocks right in here. That exact same process is responsible for Stradbroke Island off Brisbane as well. There you go, geomorphology and longshore drift, ladies and gentlemen. I saw one. When I woke up today, I had no idea I was going to be talking about Mary Poppins. Not only did I just learn that Mary Poppins is a fictional character, but I learned that the creator of that character, P.L. Travers, was actually born in this building here in Maryborough, Queensland. Yeah, fun fact for the day. Also, Maryborough, home to the Mary Poppins Festival, funnily enough. This little thing here is a thunder egg. You heard me, thunder egg. And these fun little spherulites came out of this silica-rich volcano about 120 million years ago. So this is Mount Hay in Queensland, but the world capital of thunder eggs is Oregon in the States. And each one is a little mystery until you open it up. Lucky dip, shall we? Tropical? Not tropical. You have no idea how happy I am to be here. This means 6 weeks into our TikTok tour around Australia, we have crossed the Tropic of Capricorn, which means no more winter and not much rain. And we'll stay in the tropics now until we cross that line again near the end of September near Exmouth. Tropical dance. So if this doesn't get you verified on TikTok, I don't know what will. A little while back, I was interviewed on Australian national news for the TikTok project that I'm running at the moment. At the end of the interview, they actually caught me live streaming myself. So here's a little snippet of the interview. These ladies were great, a whole lot of fun. So thank you very much.
Well, the pandemic might have stopped us all from travelling, but our next guest is inviting you on a virtual adventure.
Sid Hewson is a South Australian tour guide who will take us on a 6-month trip across the country via the entertaining medium of TikTok. Let's take a look.
Is the third biggest canyon in the world. It's actually longer and wider than the Grand Canyon. It's called Cape Tree Valley and it's just on the outskirts of Sydney, Australia. Crazy.
It just makes you want to get out and just go and travel and see Australia, doesn't it? Well, Sid Hewson joins us now. Welcome to Weekend Breakfast, Sid. You're actually sitting down. You're in a house. You're not back. Social media thing, because I'm just watching you live stream yourself as you're talking to me as well. So, got you out there. I said,
See what he does after the interview.
but it is the sign of the times.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wonderful venture,
And
though.
I think I'll go on a tour with him.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
I think it'd be good.
Did you know there are 2,000 native bee species in Australia? This is one of them. Bzzz. Oh, blimey. Sugar! So this is sugarcane. Australia is one of the biggest producers of sugar on the planet. Between Grafton in New South Wales and Mossman in Queensland, we have a 2,100 kilometre stretch, which is predominantly sugarcane, to make sugar, of which we produce about 4.5 million tonnes of each year, which brings in about $2 billion for the economy. So it's hard to avoid the sugarcane in this part of the world. It is everywhere. And the offcuts from the sugarcane end up at the Bundaberg rum factory, and that's how they make Bundy rum. But I don't understand how it tastes like sugar, but it smells like burning corn. What is that? What is that? Warning, this clip contains references to gonads. So I actually wasn't going to release this video, and then I bounced the idea off people on my live stream, and everyone said, we want to see it. So I decided to put it together. Click the notifications on my bio to be alerted whenever I'm going live, because that is the best content at the moment. But without further ado, here's the Bulls Balls of Rockhampton. This bull has balls, and that's not always the case here in Rockhampton. Rockhampton claims to be the beef capital of Australia. There's 7 statues of bulls erected around Rockhampton dedicated to the most common breeds used in the area. And these gonads here are considered to be one of the most prized trophies in the region. So after the gonads get removed, they go to great lengths to replicate and replace the testicles and make sure they're realistic and as beautiful as possible. But the newly installed testicles have extra security measures to make sure they don't get removed. I'm getting heckled about the bull's balls. Last week was the most dangerous. This week, apparently, this is the most beautiful beach on the planet. So this is Whitehaven Beach in the Whitsundays in Queensland, with its white silica-rich sands and its shallow, warm tropical seas, as well as the surrounding islands. It all goes to making this definitely one of the most beautiful beaches on the planet. And this pond of water just here is hands down one of the weirdest animals on the planet. It is an egg-laying, venomous, aquatic mammal with no stomach that sweats milk, has an electric sensor in its head, glows under UV light, and its closest and only relative is the echidna. And it looks like about 4 different animals, which probably explains the 10 sex chromosomes. This is the Australian platypus. I believe the scientific term is hodgepodge. Platypus. This is a king fern. This is the biggest fronded fern on the planet. I've been looking for this guy. Look at that. To put it in perspective, that's a huge bitch. Fern! I don't think it should be that close to my face either. Innocent plant? I think not. This is known as the gimpy gimpy, also known as the stinging tree, also known as the suicide plant. So this guy here is covered in silica hairs that are basically filled with neurotoxins, which are more or less in line with the same venom that you get from certain spiders and cone shells. So all you need to do is brush up against this, and the tiny silica hairs act like hypodermic needles, and they stick into your skin and they inject you with a neurotoxin that will put you in excruciating pain. So they say initially it feels like an electric shock, then it starts to feel like stinging wasps, and eventually the pain can increase so bad that it feels like you're getting slammed between two bricks. And this pain goes on for months and months, and there is no cure. And that's why they call it the suicide plant, because people who have been stung by this have made it quite well known that they would rather end it all than deal with the pain that comes from this plant. So I'm actually having a giveaway at Sid's Ventures. Let me know what your favorite video is and why, and I will send you a leaf of Gimpy Gimpy, as well as a free set of tongs. Yep, I'm getting out of this forest. Every dollar coming in at the moment is going towards mechanical repairs and petrol to ensure that we do get right around Australia on this informative trip and tour. So if you do want to be a part of it, every dollar is greatly appreciated and goes to continuing this tour. All right, ladies and gentlemen, woo! Welcome to the Whitsundays. So the Whitsunday Islands are a collection of 74 islands, Australia's most treasured islands, traditionally inhabited by the Ngaro people. These islands are actually quite new. Only 15 to 20,000 years ago, it all would have looked like this. Some of Australia's most well-known resorts are in the Whitsundays, but 70% of the area is national park. And these islands are all a part of the Great Barrier Reef, but that story is for another day. So there is no doubt in my mind that this is one of the most amazing places on planet Earth. Behind me we have the oldest rainforest on the planet, the World Heritage listed Daintree rainforest. And in front of me we have the World Heritage listed Great Barrier Reef, the biggest living organism on the planet and home to Nemo. So we are based up here for the next week or so, and we're going to cover everything in this forest, from murder birds to suicide plants, and everything out on this reef, from Nemo to the actual reef structure itself to killer jellyfish. So if you're not on board the tour already, jump on board, at least for the next week and a half to 2 weeks. This is one of the best places on planet Earth, and I'm going to try to give you as much amazing information about it as possible. Yes. Fronded fern on the planet. Fern. This palm was traditionally used for collecting bush food. They call it the calamus palm. I like to call it the don't touch me palm. So sending it to someone was a joke, but that is a genius idea. Yesterday I was actually driving past where I did that video, and I've taken a small sample. I've gotten in contact with 1min Micro, a guy that runs a microscope channel on TikTok. I've got his address now, so I'm sending that to him, so soon we'll be able to see what the stinging tree looks like under a microscope. Science, TikTok, collaboration. Social media at its best. Nice buttress. So these funky looking roots are unique to extremely wet rainforests. Because there is so much rain in the wet tropics, it means that the soil is extremely moist, which means that it is quite unstable. So these trees, they send out these buttress roots essentially as anchors, but not only as anchors to keep the tree stable and stop it from falling over, but it also acts as a catchment for organic litter that is falling out of the canopy. They will give the tree the nutrients it needs. So cool. So there's about 5 or 6 trees that do this. And if they're growing up on top of the hills, they won't send out these buttress roots. So the roots aren't unique to the tree, they are unique to the environment. Funky stuff. We have a kangaroo out here that actually climbs trees. In fact, we have 2 different ones. One in this forest, which looks like this, and one in the Atherton tablelands that looks like this. So these are actually tree kangaroos. And from what we understand, all kangaroos used to climb trees. They are all descendants of tree kangaroos. So all of Australia used to look like this. Now when the deserts started to form and the trees began to disappear, these tree kangaroos came out of their trees and started walking across the landscape. Well, maybe not walking, hopping. Did you know that? I'm pretty sure this is cassowary poo. Murder birds, velociturkeys, these guys get a really bad rap. In terms of them being dangerous, they've only ever killed 1 person, and that was in 1926. With their razor-like talon, they do have the ability to cause some excessive damage. But the most likely scenario is that we're going to be causing them damage, not the other way around. This is what we call a cassowary. They are what we call a keystone species. So they are so important for the wet tropical rainforest of northern Queensland because they're one of the few birds that are actually able to spread the seeds of these fruit trees and get them around the forest. And unfortunately, there's only about 4,000 of these guys left in the wild. The big bony lump on their head actually acts as a radiator to keep their head cool in the warmer months. That's amazing. Beautiful tropical beach. Makes you want to swim, doesn't it? How about no? Why? First of all, this. And secondly, so let's talk about some of the dangerous things that you're going to find out in these tropical waters, starting with the box jellyfish. In reality, there's about 50 members in this family. The one that we refer to in these tropical waters of northern Australia is the Chinerex fleckeri, the most venomous marine animal in the water. At a maximum, these guys' body can be up to 1 foot long and their tentacles can be up to 10 feet long. Each one of these tentacles contains 5,000 nematocysts, which are basically tiny darts loaded with poison. Their toxin attacks the heart, the nervous system and the skin cells, causing paralysis, cardiac arrest and even death. And if you do manage to survive, those tentacles will leave very nasty scars and will leave you in pain for weeks to come. The weird and creepy thing about this particular jellyfish is that they actually have eyes on each corner of the box. So they can actually see and actively swim towards their prey. Ew. But these guys do have one predator, and that is our friend, the sea turtle. The sea turtles will actually eat these box jellyfish. If you ever do see this sign, stay out of the water. Yeah. Unless you're going in with, like, turtles. But even then, yeah. Jellyfish to avoid in Australia. Part 2. Introducing the irukandji. These guys are a part of the box jellyfish family, but they are much, much smaller cousins, but they do pack just as much punch. So these guys are literally the size of your thumbnail. Irukandji actually comes from the name of an Aboriginal group up in this area. The thing that interests me most about these little critters is what their toxin actually does. You will develop a psychological phenomenon known as irukandji syndrome, and by all accounts, people are filled with this tremendous sense of impending doom and fear. So not only are you writhing in pain from the high blood pressure, the muscle cramps, and your kidneys feeling like they're going to fall out of your back, you are thrown into a world of absolute doom and misery. That's nasty, yeah. If you're enjoying these tour talks and this trip around Australia, every $2 coming in is going towards fuel and going towards mechanical repairs for the bike to make sure that we get all the way around Australia. So if you feel like being a part of it, yeah, remember, stay out of the water. Unless you want to look like this. If you want to see as many different animals and plants as possible in a small location, this is one of the best places on the planet to do it. This is the wet tropics in far north Queensland in Australia. It might only cover 0.2% of the Australian continent, but it is home to 30% of all the marsupials, 40% of all the birds, 30% of all frogs, 20% of all reptiles, 60% of all the butterflies, 60% of all the bat species, 25% of all the rodent species, and some of those animals are cute. Yeah, they're not all killer animals. Like, look at this guy. Oh. Just beneath the water out here is the world's biggest living organism, the Great Barrier Reef. Yeah, it's alive! Located in the Coral Sea off the coast of Queensland, this is the world's largest coral reef system. By the way, this is World Heritage number 6. Composed of 2,900 individual reefs, 900 islands, and it stretches over 2,300 kilometres. The reef contains 1,600 fish species and 600 different hard and soft corals. Now, unfortunately, a series of natural disasters combined with warming waters has led to significant coral bleaching. In June, a UNESCO monitoring mission said despite government efforts to improve the reef, there is no doubt that the reef is facing certain danger. Current negotiations are in place to determine whether it will actually lose its place on the World Heritage List. Only 2 weeks ago, UNESCO requested a full report to be submitted by February 2022 to outline the protection measures implemented to preserve the outstanding universal value of the reef. So, fingers crossed, yeah? So scientists say that this is the second most valuable environment on the entire planet. It's possibly the most beautiful. This is the World Heritage listed wet tropics of far north tropical Queensland. And this place is special on many, many levels. And this is the oldest rainforest on the planet, well over double the age of the Amazon. And it contains a living record of evolution covering the last 415 million years, going back to Pangaea and Gondwana. The UNESCO site encompasses about 29 national parks covering 900,000 hectares. And this is the most biodiverse region in Australia. So if you want to see as many different plants and animals as possible, this is the best place to do it. That's Australia, but this is Canada. We're in a little country town called Georgetown in outback Queensland. So about 1.6, 1.7 billion years ago, Australia and Canada got really close to each other. Close enough for Canada to actually unload a whole bunch of rocks onto Australia. So once that transaction was made, Canada began to drift off back into the direction it is now. Always generous people, Canadians. So anything between here and the east coast is quite young. Everything to the west in the direction we're heading is billions of years old. I'd like you to meet a friend of mine. This is Chris, the Savannah King. But this guy is the biggest recorded crocodile ever captured. He was shot on the banks of the Norman River, just near Normanton, by a lady called Christina Pawlowski back in 1957. And he is in the Guinness Book of Records for being the largest saltwater crocodile ever caught. He is huge. So Chris here measured 28 feet and 4 inches, or 8.63 meters. That's insane. The east coast of Australia is beautiful, no doubt, but nothing compares to the freedom that you have out in the middle of the country. So we've spent the last 6 weeks going on and off the Bruce Highway. Going up the Bruce, mate. Now we are on the Savannah Way, which goes from Cairns across the country through to Broome. So from here across the country, very, very different environment and very, very different mentality. Desert madness should be kicking in pretty soon. I'm getting in trouble by the tour guide. This cave through here is a part of the longest lava flow ever recorded on the planet. It's about 190,000 years old, and it's a part of the Undara lava tubes. Boop. The eruption travelled to the northwest for about 160 kilometres at a rate of 1 cubic kilometre a second. That's heaps. It followed the waterways and valleys, eventually solidifying on the outside and staying gooey in the middle. And eventually we're left with something like this. Pretty impressive stuff. Unfortunately, our time in the wet tropics has been cut a little bit short due to potential border lockdowns with Northern Territory. So we're getting out of here. I didn't get everything filmed that I wanted to, but I hope you've enjoyed the series from the wet tropics and the Great Barrier Reef. So from here, we're heading to the Undara lava tubes on the way to Northern Territory, and then the next big stop will be Kakadu National Park, back on the highway. So I don't usually make videos about beautiful places just because they're beautiful, but I made a promise to Nia. So check this out. These are children's goggles. That's all I had left. Have a look at this. There's a few pubs around Australia that have a reputation for being great. I've been to a few of them, and this is one of them. So this is the Daily Waters pub in Daily Waters in Northern Territory, and to be honest, it lived up to all of the expectations. Well, Queensland, thank you very much. You are one of the most beautiful places on earth. Your mountains, your beaches, your people, even your street signs. So much love and hospitality and beauty in this part of the world. It's been absolutely amazing. But now it is time for this. Welcome to the Northern Territory. Queensland, your roads are probably the best roads in the country. The second I've crossed into the Northern Territory, the next service station is 300 kilometres. This is going to be a very long day. So sometimes in Australia, it's better when something like this looks like this. This is healthy fire, and we need it in the Australian landscape. The Indigenous groups of this country knew this art form perfectly. They knew what needed to be burnt, when it needed to be burnt, and how often it needed to be burnt. And quite often they would burn it in a patchwork order. So different areas were going through different stages of regrowth throughout the years. It clears a build-up of fuel, it opens seed pods, it promotes new growth, which promotes new food, and it helps the animals, the plants, and the people. This is beautiful, and this is what we need to do. Queensland has been one of the most well-maintained in terms of burning off I've ever seen. Let's test it out, shall we? Yep, boom. Spot on, north to south. This is a magnetic termite mound. These are found in this part of Australia and nowhere else on Earth. From this angle, you can barely even see it. But from this angle, kaboom! So it's always pointing north to south to ensure that it catches the right amount of sun to keep the termites at the right temperature throughout the day. Crazy. But this one has been taken over by ants. That's prime real estate. Termites. Look at that. So we have two very well-known species of termites up here in the top end. One of them creates these things here. This is the termite mound of the cathedral termites, and each species will build a different style of mound depending on their requirements. Yeah, amazing little things. Look at that. So we have two very well-known species of termites up here in the top end. One of them creates these things here. This is the termite mound of the cathedral termites, and each species will build a different style of mound depending on their requirements. Amazing little things. To put it in perspective, crikey, we're in termite country. Termites are actually a lot cooler than people think. There's hundreds of different types of termites. Only a small portion of them actually make mounds, and each species makes a different type of mound. The color of the mound will depend on the soil that they're actually using. Sometimes you can get multicolored termite mounds. Cool stuff. Out here, they're very useful. They hollow out trunks and trees, which makes homes for our bird friends. They create instruments for my mate Tommy. They help to break down decaying wood. They provide nutrients for the soil, and they provide an amazing food source for all of the animals in the area. And on top of that, they're one of the most amazing architects on the planet. Look at that. It's huge. So if I had to avoid an animal's venom in Australia, it would probably be the blue-ringed octopus. Now, as funky as these guys are, they pack a punch. Their toxin basically renders you muscleless. And this includes muscles you need to do things like breathe. So you won't die as long as you have a machine with you straight away that can do your breathing for you. So you will maintain consciousness, but you just can't talk, breathe, or move. Yeah, that's a big no from Sid. Big no. What happens when you put 1,000,000 rocks into a river? Damn it. This is Lake Argyle. This is the Ord Dam, and this is one of the most spectacular bodies of water in the country. So we're in the Kimberley now, and this man-made dam that was built in 1971 houses about 20 times the amount of water that is in the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Sydney Harbour, fucking Jesus. Hey, good. Yourself? Oh yeah. I used to do tours out here 5, 6 years ago.
Oh yeah, all right.
Yeah. Hello, Stevie. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it.
Oh yeah, all right. So you're just passing through, or are you doing the run?
No, I'm doing a 6-month lap of the country.
Oh yeah, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So I'm just yeah. Well, I was a tour guide for 10 years.
Oh yeah, all right.
And then all my backpackers disappeared.
Oh yeah.
So I'm trying to do digital tour guiding. So it's beginning to turn out that some of the most venomous stuff out here is proving to be the best medicine for us. The venom from animals like the cone snail and the Sydney funnelweb have huge chemical cocktails that go into making their venom. Some of the aspects of these chemical strains we are able to extract and use for our own purposes. For example, this one here has now been FDA approved. It comes from the cone snail. It's 1,000 times more effective than morphine without any of the addictive side effects. Things are never as they seem. So they're probably more likely in the future to save your lives than take them away. So don't be scared of venomous stuff. There's much better things to be scared of. I would label Darwin as Australia's most extreme, most dangerous and most damaged city. And not only does Darwin live on the border of two very extreme environments, but in one lifetime it's been wiped off the map. Almost twice. In 1942 there was a Japanese raid on Darwin. More bombs were dropped on Darwin than on Pearl Harbor. Hundreds of people died and a huge amount of damage was caused. Then early on Christmas Day in 1974, Cyclone Tracy hit, which destroyed 70 to 80% of all the buildings and houses in Darwin. 80% of the people were evacuated after that, and most of them didn't return. The city was so flattened that they actually moved to the centre of the city to its current location. On top of that, you got Mitchell Street, and now with the US Navy base in a Chinese-owned harbour, what could possibly go wrong? So a wise man said to me once, he said, if a crocodile wants you, he's going to take you because crocodile don't give a f***. This is croc country. This is croc country. This is crocodile country. And not just this, like all of this is crocodile country. These guys are living dinosaurs. They are at the top of the food chain and they've been doing their job and they've been doing it well for about 200 million years. They're very good at what they do. So we have about 200,000 saltwater crocodiles in Australia. About half of those are in the Northern Territory and most of those are in this region here around Mary River and Darwin. So I like to have obscure and interesting facts about the things that I talk about, but crocodiles are crocodiles. And it's pretty much impossible to not remember crocodiles when you're in the Northern Territory because they're everywhere. Crocodiles, crocodiles, crocodiles. When you're not seeing them in pubs, you're seeing signs everywhere saying crocodiles, crocodiles, crocodiles. And they are the only thing that will attempt to eat you in this country. True story. Just down in these rocks here is one of the most impressive, it's been labelled as one of the finest rock art galleries on the planet. We're at a place called Ubir in Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory. Over tens of thousands of years and through hundreds of different language groups, there's been a lot of different styles of rock art adopted and used. And the X-ray paintings here at Ubir have become one of the most iconic styles in Australia. Rock art was used to pass on teachings and to educate people about how to live, how to travel, how to hunt, and contained important lessons for the kids so that they would survive. Amazing stuff. So they knew for thousands of years that something out here was making people sick. Large areas of this landscape through here were traditionally known to many Aboriginal people as sickness country. It actually turns out that there's huge deposits of uranium right throughout Kakadu. The traditional owners of this area knew which areas were causing people to get sick and they avoided staying in these places and they also avoided upturning the soil. Luckily, where most of that uranium is protected by national park and Aboriginal land laws. Most of it. This is the biggest national park in Australia, covering about 20,000 square kilometres. It was one of the first to be World Heritage listed. It's deeply connected to the traditional people and the traditional ways. This is Kakadu National Park, covered in woodlands, wetlands, and dotted with rocky outcrops, ridges and waterfalls. Kakadu is home to 1/3 of all of the bird species in Australia, a bunch of animals found nowhere else, about 10,000 crocodiles, also home to some of the finest rock art found anywhere in the world, and the oldest living culture on the planet. There is an incredible peace and majesty here. So this is the 8th UNESCO site that we've been to. The next one is the Bungle Bungles. Make sure you join along for that tour. This is the longest river in the Northern Territory. This is the Victoria River. It is about 550 kilometres long and it is home to a buttload of saltwater crocodiles. Sometimes the floods through here are so high, they actually go over the old bridge. So, and this is one of my favourite photos ever. This is what they used to have to do to get beer to the roadhouse when it was flooded. For a hard-earned thirst, the best cold beer is Vic. And this also means we're almost in the Kimberley. A few years ago, a young Italian man actually got down on one knee and proposed to me up on this ridge behind us. It means we're back on my touring routes. Woo! Everywhere we've been over the last 10 weeks, I have not done any tours. So I've had to do a lot of study and a lot of research trying to find the best things to talk about and the best places to stay as well. Now we're in the Victoria Valley about to head into the Kimberley. I know everything that I want to talk about for the next couple of weeks and every campsite that I want to stay at as well. But that is a massive relief and it is a huge amount of excitement as well because I know what we're looking forward to and it's amazing. So no offense to Tourism Western Australia at all. I would have loved to have been at the brainstorming session where you guys came up with the slogan for Western Australia. A great place. And it is a great, by the way. Nothing educational here. I just wanted to show you a rock art site and in fact a cave that I used to bring my tourists to back in the day. Up in here, let's take a look. Crocodile. Yeah, this is one of the coolest little caves. So you've basically got different rooms through here, and even though it's stinking hot outside, even just inside the cave, it is so much cooler. A lot of the rocks through here look like they've been varnished. And the oil from your skin will embed into the rock and create a shiny surface. And that is always a telltale sign that there has been a place that has been used for thousands of years quite consistently. I found some really interesting places by following the shiny rocks. There's bats in that cave. I have discovered the most perfect place in the world to take refuge if there is a zombie apocalypse. Welcome to Kununurra. And why Kununurra, you ask? Well, every reason. First of all, unlimited supply of fresh water, unlimited supply of electricity, unlimited grounds for agriculture. The closest town is Katherine, which is 500 kilometres away. The next one is Broome, which is 1,000 kilometres away. And between those two towns, you have huge distances, rugged mountain ranges, and croc-infested rivers. Kununurra has a vast array of beautiful attractions where you can relax in your spare time. Sandalwood capital of the world, always smelling good. It's even got its own rum distillery. Between endless food, electricity, water, rum, and if it all goes horribly wrong, you've got access to the ocean up at Wyndham. So if it ever does happen and you're able to get to Kununurra, I'll see you there. Kapok, not K-pop, Kapok. This is one of the most common flowers you'll see in the Kimberley. It is literally everywhere. So the flowers are edible, fantastic in salads, and it's called kapok because it's named after the kapok cotton. These little green seed pods, once they dry out and turn brown, they crack open, and they release a whole bunch of seeds surrounded by a very much a cotton-like material. Kapok. Wood. Like seriously, wood. In Latin, Gyrocarpus americanus. For the kids out there, we'll call it stinkwood. And why do we call it wood? Because it burns like and it smells like. It's also known as the helicopter tree, which is where the gyro part of the Latin name comes from these little guys. So you throw these up in the air and they spin. That's amazing. That's a cool tree. Yeah. So one day someone decided to put a whole bunch of rocks in the Ord River here, and they created this. This is Lake Argyle. This is the biggest freshwater dam in Australia, and it's one of the most beautiful parts of the country. So this is our introduction to the Kimberley. This dam wall was completed in 1971, and the dam filled up very quickly. The average capacity is about 20 times the size of Sydney Harbour. And after really heavy rains, 70 times Sydney Harbour. It provides an endless amount of fresh water. It also has a hydroelectrical output, which essentially powers all of Kununurra. In terms of its practicality, its use, and its beauty, it's one of the most perfect dammed lakes in the world. The only unfortunate thing about this dam is that the traditional peoples weren't consulted or compensated for everything that was lost and is lying at the bottom of the lake. Might not look like much, but this is actually a plantation of the most expensive wood on the planet, Indian sandalwood. And the plantations are quite confusing because sandalwood is actually a parasitic tree, so it needs other trees to live off. Kununurra in northern Western Australia is now the world's biggest producer of Indian sandalwood, with about 20 million trees in the area. So it takes about 15 years for a crop to mature and be used, but once it is, it sells for about $3,000 a kilogram. Yeah, that's expensive wood. So on the other side of this lake is a geological mystery. We have these banded rocks called zebra rocks. And as far as geologists are concerned, it is still considered a mystery on how these rocks actually came into being. So they are found here on the other side of Lake Argyle and nowhere else on the planet. It's one of the only rocks that we can't really explain. These nuts. It's the biggest boab nut I've seen. Whoa. And this is what a boab nut looks like. This one is huge. And inside the nut is this white foamy material called pith. And you can actually eat this stuff. It's a little bit funky, it's a little bit bitter, but it's very high in vitamin C. So at least in the Kimberley, when I'm eating 2-minute noodles, I know I won't get scurvy. Tastes like pith. Now, I don't usually like being spat on, but this was quite refreshing. I would like to introduce you to my favorite fish. These guys here. Look at them all. So these little spotty fish are quite common in the Kimberley, and they're called the 7-spotted archer fish. Because of their skills similar to those with a bow and arrow, they have the ability to take a big mouthful of water and use that water to spit at things outside the water. So yesterday I was sitting in the water and these guys were spitting at me, trying to get the ants and the flies off my legs. And why are they my favorite? Because they've got character. So there's a few iconic things in the Kimberley. This is one of them. This is a boab. Now there's a few arguments how these actually got into Australia, but they're pretty much exactly the same as one of the species in Madagascar. So the general theory is that one of the seed pods had actually travelled across the ocean from Madagascar to Australia many thousands of years ago. So something like this here would be about 1,500 years old. When the trees are quite young, the centre of the tree will hold a lot of water. When the tree reaches a certain age, the centre of the tree will hollow out. These are one of the funkiest plants on the planet. So a bit of a disclaimer, a sensitivity warning for some images and information in this next clip related to the imprisonment and kidnap of Indigenous peoples. So it's very rare in Australia that we have real physical evidence of the darker things that have happened over the last couple of hundred years. But these boab prison trees are an excellent reminder as to the historical happenings. A lot of the Indigenous people through this area were arrested, blackbirded, kidnapped, and they were taken across the landscape. And along the way there would be a few checkpoints or lockups, and this is one of them. So this is a boab prison tree, and they would use these trees to basically lock all of the prisoners in the tree for the night. Now, traditionally speaking, these big, old, creepy looking boabs had a lot of cultural connotations connected to them, and they were seen as a place of dark forces. So to be arrested and kidnapped, dragged across your own country, and then locked up in a place that you would culturally avoid, quite a layer cake. And there's even bolts left in the tree from where the door used to close. Nothing educational here. I just wanted to show you a rock art site, and in fact a cave that I used to bring my tourists to back in the day. Up in here, let's take a look. Crocodile. This is one of the coolest little caves. So you've basically got different rooms through here. And even though it's stinking hot outside, even just inside the cave, it is so much cooler. A lot of the rocks through here look like they've been varnished. And the oil from your skin will embed into the rock and create a shiny surface. And that is always a telltale sign that there has been a place that has been used for thousands of years quite consistently. I found some really interesting places by following the shiny rocks. There's bats in that cave. So this lake contains 25,000 crocodiles. Would I swim in it? Yes. Have I swum in it? Yes. Why did I swim in it? Because they're freshwater crocodiles. There is a massive difference between fresh and saltwater crocodiles in their physical appearance, but most importantly in their diet. Freshwater crocodiles, the last thing they want to do is try to eat us. They eat little fish. Their jaws aren't designed to eat something like this. So people have been bitten, but usually when they've disturbed the crocodile, and they'll give you nothing more than a dog's bite worth of damage. So the plan was to go down that road. That's where the fun really starts. So it's a bit of a sad day, really. The thing I was looking forward to sharing with you the most was down this road, which is the Gibb River Road in the heart of the Kimberley in Western Australia. But unfortunately, to be safe from what I've realised on the roads that I've been on, there's no way this bike can handle the Gibb River Road. So we'll have to do this again in the future, but I'll come back with a car and I'll do a Kimberley special, hopefully. The Kimberley in Western Australia contains some of my favourite styles of Aboriginal rock art. But unfortunately, now that we're not actually heading down the Gibb River Road, I won't be able to show you a lot of the really amazing sites, especially related to Gwion and the Wodjina rock art styles. So for our Kimberley experience in terms of rock art, this is about as good as it's going to get. Yeah, it's still a beautiful site nonetheless. What you're looking at here is basically the Great Barrier Reef, but it's about 400 million years old and there's not a drop of water to be seen. So this is one of my favourite places in the country in terms of its geology, in terms of its cultural attributes, and in terms of its natural beauty. So this is essentially a fossilised reef system, very, very similar to the Great Barrier Reef. All of this was formed in the Devonian period when sea life essentially took over the world. And this old barrier reef system used to stretch for about 2,500 kilometres right through the northwestern part of Australia. Everything you would expect to find in a fossilised reef system is found through here, including remnants of corals and sea life as well. A lot of the cracks and fissures and caves formed through this reef system actually provided really good shelter and protection for the local Aboriginal people, especially the Bungle mob. And within some of these caves you get beautiful mineralisation. Unfortunately, due to circumstance, I can't take you to my favourite parts of this reef, which include Tunnel Creek and Winjana Gorge. This might sound weird to some people from some countries, but in Australia we have bins for toads. Originally native to Central and South America, 102 cane toads were brought into Australia in 1935 to combat the cane beetle problem in Queensland. Skip forward 85 years, we now have about 200 million cane toads spread right across the top of Australia. The biggest problem with this is the fact that our native animals love to eat them, but these guys are highly toxic. So everywhere that the cane toads move into, our local native population of carnivorous animals basically disappears. Yeah, the only positive to come out of it is the fact that crows have realised that if they flip them over and then eat them from the stomach in, then they don't get sick or die. Yeah, it's a thing. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to admit defeat on this one. There's no way we're going to make it in there, but this is Purnululu. Purnululu is the 8th UNESCO site on our list. Listed in 2003 for its incredible natural beauty and its outstanding geological value, it was only opened to the public in 1983 after largely being ignored on a hidden corner of a cattle station. Famous for its trademark banded domes and beautiful chasms, the Bungle Bungle range is extensive and it's well worth the effort to explore if you're ever in the Kimberley. So close, so close. When I was running tours through the Kimberley, this was one of my favourite campsites. What you're looking at here is basically the Great Barrier Reef, but it's about 400 million years old and there's not a drop of water to be seen. So this is one of my favourite places in the country in terms of its geology, in terms of its cultural attributes, and in terms of its natural beauty. So this is essentially a fossilised reef system, very, very similar to the Great Barrier Reef. All of this was formed in the Devonian period when sea life essentially took over the world. And this old barrier reef system used to stretch for about 2,500 kilometres right through the northwestern part of Australia. Everything you would expect to find in a fossilised reef system is found through here, including remnants of corals and sea life as well. A lot of the cracks and fissures and caves formed through this reef system actually provided really good shelter and protection for the local Aboriginal people, especially the Bunaba mob. And within some of these caves you get beautiful mineralisation. Unfortunately, due to circumstance, I can't take you to my favourite parts of this reef, which include Tunnel Creek and Winjana Gorge. I've got another local geological mystery for you. This time, pink diamonds. 90% of the world's pink diamonds have come from the Argyle diamond mine. Many interesting factors at work here, how they were formed, how they were mined, their rarity, beauty and price tag, but scientists still can't explain why pink diamonds are pink. The Argyle diamond mine only functioned for about 35 years. It closed down last year. Every year they would produce about one champagne glass full of pink diamonds. And these guys were already expensive, but now that the mine is closed, those prices are going to go crazy. From what I understand, the highest bid at last year's tender for one pink diamond was in excess of $80 million. Crazy. Want to play a game? About 120,000 years ago, a 17,000-ton iron meteorite hit this piece of the Earth's crust, creating a crater about 900 metres wide and currently 60 metres deep. This is Wolf Creek Crater, and it's claimed to be the second biggest obvious crater on Earth after the Barringer Crater in Arizona. Winner, winner. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to admit defeat on this one. There's no way we're going to make it in there, but this is Purnululu. Purnululu is the 8th UNESCO site on our list. Listed in 2003 for its incredible natural beauty and its outstanding geological value, it was only opened to the public in 1983 after largely being ignored on a hidden corner of a cattle station. Famous for its trademark banded domes and beautiful chasms, the Bungle Bungle range is extensive and it's well worth the effort to explore if you're ever in the Kimberley. So close, so close. Fascinating stuff. It's a water trough. So the interesting thing about this water trough, there it is. First of all, it's the longest water trough in Australia. And second of all, and I haven't been able to verify it, but apparently it used to be the longest one in the world until a tourist from Texas, who was a rancher, came out here, saw that we had the longest cattle trough in the world, went back to his ranch in Texas and made one that was 1 foot longer. So that's the story, but I can't verify it. But it wouldn't surprise me. This is the Fitzroy River. When this is flowing in the wet season up in the Kimberley, this is the second biggest river on the planet. At its widest point, it's about 11 kilometers wide. Crazy. Righty, I've been waiting for this. Sid's Ventures. So once I perfect the print, I'll hopefully get these available for people to purchase. And big love to my sister who helped me design the logo. Yeah. Woo! Out here in the southwest of the Kimberley, the country has so much character and culture connected to it that it has its own name. So this is Pindan country, and this isn't dirt, this is Pindan. So much so that if you have a car covered with this stuff in Broome, you won't say there's dirt all over the car, you'll say the car's covered in Pindan. Pindan country. Look at this, and then look at this. So the Kimberley has some of the biggest tides on the planet and the biggest tides in Australia. Today we've got a tide variation of 9 metres, which is pretty big. Around the corner at Derby, we have the biggest tides in Australia and one of the biggest intertidal zones in the world. For the king tide in Derby, tidal difference is 11.8 metres. But the winner of this one is Canada. So the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia has the biggest intertidal zone in the world with tides about 16.3 metres. Crazy. So I promised one of my followers I would talk about camels. The first time I saw a camel. Camels. So in terms of camelness, these guys are actually known as dromedaries, and Australia is the only country in the world that has wild, free-roaming, feral camels. Apparently we have about 1 million wild camels in Australia, and we do have culling programs in place to make sure that those numbers are kept to a limit that the environment can withstand. Originally brought out for exploring and for creating train tracks. At the end of their jobs, a lot of the camel keepers are supposed to kill their camels, but they develop such an intimate relationship with them that they let a lot of them loose. And that's how we have 1 million wild camels roaming around Australia. Yep, camels. Seagull. More camels. Mangroves. So mangroves aren't actually a tree. It's more of a habitat. So there's about 70 different species that are referred to as mangroves, and they grow in intertidal zones and brackish waters. So in terms of the world environment, these guys are really, really important. They help to keep the land stable, protecting it from erosion, storm surges, and they are also one of the most carbon-hungry plants on the planet. Definitely not unique to Australia. These guys are found in about 118 different countries. And the country that has the most mangroves is Indonesia. Bagus. So this is the largest collection of dinosaur footprints found anywhere in the world. I had to wait 4 days before I could shoot this clip. But when the tide out here at Gunthium Point in Broome drops below 2.6 meters, a story is revealed. A story that is written in sandstone and is about 130 million years old. This is the dinosaur coast. And written in the rocks all up the Dampier Peninsula is an ancient story of when dinosaurs roamed the earth. About 21 different species have been recorded, and there are thousands of examples of these footprints all over the coast. And this wonder brings paleontologists of all ages out of the woodwork. I would almost bet that there's been more love songs written about this part of the world than anywhere else. This is the Kimberley. So stretching from Broome to Wolf Creek up to Kununurra, at about 3 times the size of England and with a population of 35,000, this area is largely an untouched wilderness. This whole area used to be a separate landmass that connected with Australia about 1.8 billion years ago. So that in itself gives rise to a completely different feeling through the landscape. So the area is filled with ancient rivers, valleys and ranges, as well as an extremely strong connection to country and culture and community through the Kimberley. Spotted with natural wonders, this is one of the most remote and rugged and beautiful places on the planet. If you want to experience the Kimberley without going there, listen to the Pegram Brothers. It'll give you a good idea of some of the songs written about the place. About 29% of all of the iron on the planet comes from this area. Magnet. And that's what it's all about. This out here is one of the oldest landscapes on the entire planet. The only other part of the Earth's crust that is older than this is the Kapval Craton in South Africa. This is the Pilbara. No, that's Gina. This is the Pilbara, more specifically the Pilbara Craton. Having begun formation about 3.5 billion years ago, the Pilbara Craton has been relatively untouched in geological terms. And that is one of the reasons why there are so many natural resources trapped in the ground, which is what it is generally known for in modern times. The iron ore alone brings in excess of $50 billion into Australia every year, which is one of the main reasons they would like to become their own country. True story. Marble Bar. The Marble Bar is known as Australia's hottest town, temperature-wise. It set a world record almost 100 years ago by having 161 days consecutively above 37.8 degrees Celsius, or 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that still has not been broken. Temperatures have maxed out at Marble Bar at about 49.3 degrees Celsius, and that's in the shade. But in terms of an average maximum temperature, the winner of the hottest place in Australia actually goes to Wyndham, which is back up in the Kimberley. So these rocks are 2.7 billion years old, and that's not even the fun fact for the day. Out here, this is the biggest concentration of rock art anywhere on the planet. I even asked one of the locals about the rock art in the area, and he's like, "Nah, mate, no rock art around here." I was like, "Well, but yeah, no, there's a million of them." This is one of the most impressive cultural sites I've been to in Australia, and I don't know anyone who's actually heard of it. This is Murujuga National Park up in the Pilbara, and it's estimated that there's 1 million petroglyphs through these rocks, through the archipelago. and evidence of the Nardinali mobs living up here for about 47,000 years. So apart from all the rock art sites, there's evidence everywhere of campsites and occupation, including midden piles and grinding stones. Murujuga National Park. Amazing, amazing part of the world. This site here is called Nadali. Tasmanian tiger, thylacine, an emu. The emu depicted here is almost identical to the black space that is used in the Milky Way to depict the emu up in the stars. Nice gas refinery right next door. This is pink mulla. I once had a very well-to-do elderly Sydney lady on one of my tours, and she asked me what this was called. And I said, pink mulla. And she scoffed and turned to me and said, why would they call it pink when it's clearly lilac? So these remind me of her forever. Are you okay? Am I okay? It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to feel blue. And that's what this Blue Tree project is all about. There are 645 registered blue trees right around Australia. And it's just a good reminder to remind people that there are people there for them, and it's okay to be blue. So travelling around Australia, I always find it interesting to learn about the specific seasons each Aboriginal group had around the country. And quite often they'll have 4 seasons or 6 seasons or 8 seasons, all depicted by the changes in the plants, the movements of the animals, or the actual weather itself. And all of these phases are written into their creation stories. And knowing these stories and reading the signs gives you a good idea of where you need to be and what you're able to hunt at that point in time. I found it quite interesting yesterday because I learnt that the 2 groups here in the coastal part of the Pilbara, the Nalunga and the Yidjibanji, only had 2 seasons, Matu and Gaban, hot and cold season. And that's it, which I thought was quite interesting. So I thought I'd share that with you. Yeah, Pilbara. In places like this is ideal bush camp situation, but it largely depends on what part of the country I'm in. So I've stayed at bush camps, caravan parks, private camps, national parks, on the side of highways, at a couple of hostels, and at a few friends' places. So in 3 months of living on a bike, I'd say most of that time has been spent. I've had a few people ask me if I can explain the equipment through the equipment that I have. So in 3 months of living on a bike, I'd say most of that time has been spent in places like this. This is ideal bush camp situation, but it largely depends on what part of the country I'm in. So I've stayed at bush camps, caravan parks, private camps, national parks, on the side of highways, at a couple of hostels, and at a few friends' places. I've had a few people ask me if I can explain the equipment that I have and how I'm actually using it to survive a life on the road. So I will run you through the equipment that I have very, very soon. Yeah, but this is kind of where I sleep, man. I actually met this guy this morning, and after driving past his vehicle on the way out of Exmouth, it's inspired me to talk a little bit about driving safety. So it doesn't matter if you're in Australia with kangaroos or if you're in Canada with deer. If something jumps on the road in front of you, do not turn that steering wheel. Brake as much as you can, as safely as you can, but do not turn that wheel. All right, stay safe. Good question. Not all rocks are billions of years old. In fact, not many rocks are billions of years old. So the rocks from that video are 2.7 billion years old, but the rocks beneath me here are only 4,000 years old. So as these shells wash up onto the beach, through a process of chemical weathering and gradual pressure, they are cemented together to become limestone. So even when a volcano erupts, the magma that comes out and solidifies, that is brand new rock. Some old rocks will stay where they are for a very long time, and other rocks will be recycled, and other rocks will be created completely fresh and new, like what I'm sitting on here. Yeah, cool. I hope that answers your question. The Indian Ocean is a big place, and 50% of all of the coral in the Indian Ocean is found on this tiny piece of coast right here. This is the Ningaloo Reef. This is the largest fringe coral reef on the planet. And a fringe reef basically means you can literally walk off the beach, and as soon as you submerge yourself in the water, you are in the middle of one of the most beautiful coral reefs on the planet. In fact, most people I've spoken to around here rate this well and truly over the Great Barrier Reef. Just amazing. It's just amazing, like it really is. If you like archaeology, you might be interested in the research that is being done out here in Cape Range in Western Australia. There's evidence of Indigenous population through this range dating back about 40,000 years, but only one archaeological dig has ever been led in this range, and that was into one cave where they discovered thousands of motifs and artefacts, as well as the oldest piece of jewellery ever found in Australia, a shell bracelet dating back about 35,000 years. So that work that was done back in the 80s has pretty much been the only exploration of the area in terms of trying to find cultural evidence. But archaeologist Peter Veth is now on a mission for the next 5 to 10 years. He's already pretty certain that he'll be able to push the date of occupancy out here from 40 back to 60,000 years. Really cool stuff. So if that interests you, there's an interview with Peter Veth on a podcast. I'll put the details for that in the messages below here. But yeah, amazing place, amazing. Yeah. So I don't want to start any trouble here, but I just thought I'd let you know that New South Wales has a bigger banana than Western Australia. Yeah. Trivia time. What is the biggest rock on the planet? 3, 2, 1. Uluru? Possibly. Mount Augustus might be the winner. So in terms of a single rock mass, Mount Augustus is actually 1.5 times the size of Uluru. This is located in outback Western Australia. I have heard from geologists that Mount Augustus actually has a big crack in the middle, meaning that it's actually 2 rocks. Let me know what you think. So if you've been along for the tour, you might remember this. That was a couple of months ago, and now, boop, that's it for the tropics. It's October, so that's not a bad thing. South. And this probably tops the charts. This is a limestone karst system. Specifically, this is Cape Range National Park in Western Australia. So all of this is basically a fossilised reef system that is being pushed up out of the ocean over the period of about 60 million years. And the fun thing about karst systems is that they are riddled with caves and tunnels. And it's almost impossible to completely discover everything that is out here. So that sense of mystery and adventure, wrapped in with the biological and ecological discoveries found in the caves, as well as the extreme nature of caving, wraps many things I love about the world together and puts it in one neat package. So there's been about 700 caves discovered through this range, but there are probably hundreds and hundreds of undiscovered entries, tunnels, caves and sinkholes, which is one of the reasons you need to be careful when walking around a limestone karst system, because it's quite easy to disappear. So this is what I've been looking for. It's no secret that I'm a bit of a rock nerd, but not many people know my favourite geological formations. The only reason this town of Exmouth exists is because this exists. Exmouth was built to support this base and supply housing for the families of the US personnel. There are 13 tall radio towers all connected together with wires, creating one of the biggest radio transmitters on the planet. This provides very low frequency radio transmissions to Navy ships and submerged submarines in the Indian and the Pacific Oceans. Tower 0 in the middle is 387 meters high, so that's huge. Yeah, so Exmouth, it's only 50 years old, all because of this. True story. And this is an extremely diverse marine environment. The Ningaloo Reef is home to about 1,500 different marine species, some of which are the most iconic and beautiful marine animals on the planet. We have about 6,000 sea turtles, dugongs, stingrays, sharks, manta rays, whale sharks, and humpback whales, just to name a few. In fact, half of all of the humpback whales on planet Earth come through the Ningaloo Reef every single year. If you're interested in seeing more of the marine life through here, check out the films and photography of Tom Cannon and Alex Kidd, 2 local photographers that live up here. Fantastic. There is literally so much to say about this place. Look at that. Stretching from just south of Coral Bay right up around the top end of Cape Range. And this part of the world is so beautiful and so ecologically diverse that it is a World Heritage Site. And it was given that label in 2011 for its biodiversity and for its natural beauty. So this makes it UNESCO Site number 10. One more to go on the mainland, folks, one more. And just between you and me, I've actually been here for 2 weeks. I took a bit of a break after 3.5 months on the road. A bit of exhaustion and mental fatigue was kicking in. So I've been here for good reason. Ningaloo Reef, like, it's actually hard to leave, but I have to, it's time to go. It's all fish. Fish, wow, look at that. Sweet, all right. Thank you, Ningaloo. I've got to head into the desert. And this part of the world is so beautiful and so ecologically diverse that it is a World Heritage Site. And it was given that label in 2011 for its biodiversity and for its natural beauty. So this makes it UNESCO Site number 10. One more to go on the mainland, folks. One more. If you're enjoying the tour, if you like animals and if you like games, you're in luck because we're going to combine all of those things. So I'm going to incorporate a best-selling children's book called The A to Z of Australian Bush Creatures by Mike Mollard. Going from A to Z, every page has a bunch of animals starting with that letter. So in the next 2 months, I want to tick off an animal from every letter of the alphabet using Mike's book here. We've already done a few over the last few months, but there's a whole bunch more. So we're going to use this as our little animal Bible for the next couple of months. And at the end, we might even have some sort of giveaway. Yeah. So stay tuned because this is going to be fun. I just learnt about an animal that I'd never heard of before. It's one of the biggest and fluffiest bees in the world, and it lives underground in the hard clay pans of Western Australia. This is Dawson's burrowing bee. Oops. There was heaps of them this year because of all the rain in Western Australia. And there's a few interesting things about them, but I just wanted to let you know that they exist. Yeah, Dawson's burrowing bee. Sometimes a fence isn't enough, so you need to make it electric. Sometimes that's not enough, so you add a cattle grid. Sometimes that's not enough, so you turn it into a barking fence. So this is all a part of what we call Project Eden, which is essentially to keep this place as protected as possible from wild dogs and feral cats in order to conserve and protect our native animals that are found in this part of the world. Here boy, here boy. Sometimes a fence isn't enough, so you need to make it electric. Sometimes that's not enough, so you add a cattle grid. Sometimes that's not enough, so you turn it into a barking fence. So this is all a part of what we call Project Eden, which is essentially to keep this place as protected as possible from wild dogs and feral cats in order to conserve and protect our native animals that are found in this part of the world. You learn something every day. Here boy, here boy. And today we're going to talk about the Johnson shaft. This is a beach. These are shells. This is Shell Beach. Any questions? Without these funny looking rocks out here, TikTok wouldn't exist. Crazy. These are stromatolites. These are monuments to life on Earth, dating back 3.5 billion years. Hamelin Pool here in Shark Bay is home to the most diverse and abundant examples of these living fossils found anywhere on the planet. And the structures themselves aren't living beings, they're actually made up of a huge microbial colony of bacteria and are considered to be living fossils and the earliest record of life on Earth. The stromatolites actually created the original source of oxygen in our atmosphere before we had trees to do a similar job. So there's a good chance without these guys, we wouldn't have the atmosphere that we need to survive, which means without them, we wouldn't be here, which in turn means... This is probably my favourite bush medicine in Australia. This is known as pencil vine or caustic vine. Let me show you how it works. So you apply this to any open wounds, it will stop the bleeding, disinfect the wound. When it dries out, it will be a clear film, and that will stay on there for a few days. Yeah, one of my faves. This is a big one. Look at that. All gone. I've made something for you and I really hope you like it. I've created an interactive map of our TikTok tour around Australia from the last few months, and pretty much everything I've spoken about has been marked on the map, generally in the exact location where it was filmed. So the red line on the map marks the route that we've taken since we left Melbourne 141 days ago. Hello, birds. Hello. And if you do have specific subjects that you're interested in, like geology or animals, then you can highlight those topics and then they will be the only ones that show up on the map. You don't need to leave TikTok at all. The whole thing is incorporated within the platform. So once you're done, you can just scroll off and boom, Gordon Ramsay's in your face. So I really hope it gives you a more realistic feel as if you actually are a part of the tour as we do move around the country over the next few weeks. And if you have any questions about the tour or if you have any questions about the map, please feel free to ask. I promise I will answer every single one of them in the comments below. Yeah. But in the meantime, I'm excited that... So this is an interesting part of Australia to be driving through. We're basically getting out of the red sands of the top end and getting into the subtemperate areas and the agricultural areas. It's interesting to see these two worlds overlapping. So from here, it's going to get a lot greener and a lot cooler. Boo! This is coal. So I didn't think coal was interesting until I realised it was. A lot of the world's coal reserves were actually formed before fungi had learnt how to eat cellulose, which is the hard stuff in wood. So there was a time in the Earth's history where all of these trees kept on falling down and there was nothing to actually eat them. So eventually they all built up, compacted and heated up underground and became coal, which is basically fossilised sunlight. Like really. Yeah, so coal, it's kind of interesting. Coal. Every year in Australia between November and April we have our cyclone season. This we are used to. The vast majority of our cyclones hit between Broome and Exmouth, but they do scatter right across the top of the country. They're quite well prepared for it and the buildings are built to withstand those cyclones. Unfortunately for the residents here of Kalbarri, in April this year, tropical cyclone Seroja hit the coast right here and ripped through the town. Because this isn't a usual cyclone area, none of the buildings are actually built to withstand those winds. So about 70% of all of the buildings in Kalbarri were damaged or destroyed, and in a community of only 1,500 people, with that amount of damage and the fatalities involved, it's had a huge impact on this small coastal town. So government bodies are thinking about actually moving that cyclone boundary further to the south. As the weather is changing, we need to adapt in terms of what we're actually going to be prepared for in the coming future. One of the greatest battles in human history happened just out here, the Great Emu War. Seriously, it's a thing, and not only is it a thing, but the emus won. Seriously. Back in 1932, the farmers out here couldn't deal with the surge of the emu population who were devastating their crops. The farmers were pleading with the government to do something about it. Next minute, the military is called in to take care of the situation. So the birds kept on breaking up, scattering, running around in circles, which not only meant that they wasted most of their ammunition, but the birds actually had a capacity to absorb bullets. And there's an actual quote from Major Meredith, who was in charge of the operation, and he said, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, we could face any army in the world." So the crestfallen unit basically had to withdraw and admit defeat after running out of bullets and realising that the whole process was uneconomical. So emus are actually one of the most stupid birds on the planet. No offence to them. They're lovely, but that is a part of the reason they won the war. But yeah, what do you do? I came here and I was expecting to talk about the geological mysteries connected with the pinnacles here in Numbung National Park. But then I heard about the traditional stories from the Noongar people and I found them much more exciting. So here in Yuwat country in the Noongar language group, this place was known as Werribee Devil Place. And all of these pinnacles represent fossilised ghosts of young men who disobeyed traditional law and came through this area. So one story I've heard is that the pinnacles themselves represent these solitary characters, and another story I've heard is that all of these pinnacles represent the fossilised fingers of these young men trying to claw their way back out of the sand that they've been swallowed up by. So I'm a huge fan of geology, but sometimes the traditional groups of Australia just have much better stories than any scientist could put together. Yeah, the pinnacles. This is one of the most well-known and unknown places in Australia. This is the Mugumba Mission, also known as the Moore River Settlement, and this site was made famous in the movie The Rabbit-Proof Fence. The story directly relates to 3 young Aboriginal girls who were taken from their homeland in a place called Geological up in the desert in Western Australia, and they were brought down here to be assimilated into this new culture. So these 3 young girls escaped the mission. They went north to the Moore River and then eventually connected with the Rabbit-Proof Fence, which they knew would lead them all the way back to their home country of Geelong. I had no idea this place was still standing until a local actually introduced me to the place, and he expressed his keen interest to have the place recognised and protected for its cultural and historical value. But as you can see, that's not happening at the moment. But let me know what you think, whether they should preserve this place in regards to its historical and cultural value for educating the generations in the future. So this is the only monastic town in Australia, which basically means the whole town is a monastery established by Spanish Benedictine monks back in 1846, primarily as a mission for the Yuwat Aboriginal group in this area. This is New Norcia, located about 130 kilometres north of Perth. The museum, the artefacts, the artwork, the architecture, and even the bakery are quite well known throughout this region. For the first time since its settlement, the local community is selling off vast tracts of some of the best agricultural land in Western Australia in order to pay for legal expenses and compensation being paid out to people who were abused here back in the 50s, 60s and 70s. Yeah. This place was known as Werribee Devil Place, and all of these pinnacles represent fossilised ghosts of young men who disobeyed traditional law and came through this area. One story I've heard is that the pinnacles themselves represent these solitary characters, and another story I've heard is that all of these pinnacles represent the fossilised fingers of these young men trying to claw their way back out of the sand that they've been swallowed up by. Yeah, the pinnacles. This is actually one of the most isolated places on the planet. As far as cities go, this is Perth in Western Australia. To put it into perspective, Perth is the only capital city in this picture. In fact, it's the only city over 1 million people. Being closer to Jakarta than Sydney, Perth basically has its own corner of the planet. It's almost as if it would be a great place to be during a pandemic, right? I've been told forever that the southwest of Australia is one of the most beautiful parts of the country, and it's about the only part of the country I've never been to before. So this is our introduction to the southwest, and in the coming videos you can look forward to scenes like this and this and this and this, and it's absolutely, I'm not going to do it justice, but I'll do my best. But in the meantime, welcome to the southwest of the southwest. Sensitivity warning on this next clip. It relates to topics regarding unmarked Aboriginal burial grounds and the imprisonment of traditional peoples. So this island here has a dark history. It's commonly known as Rottnest Island, but to the Noongar people of southwest Western Australia, it's known as Wodjumup, which means the island of the spirits. This place only became an island about 7,000 years ago. There is evidence of occupation and artifacts that have been found out here dating back about 30,000 years. So this was seen as a place of great spiritual connection and essentially a stepping stone to the next life down on the west end of the island. So when European settlement came into this area, a colony was set up at what was known as the Swan River Settlement, which is modern day Fremantle, and eventually issues between two very different legal systems and cultures ensued. In 1839, it was officially declared that Wodjumup here was going to become the site of a large Aboriginal prison, which it was used as for almost 100 years. All of the old buildings on the island were actually built by those prisoners. During the course of the life of imprisonment here, around about 3,700 Aboriginal men and boys spent time on the island, and about 10% of those never left the island, dying for a variety of different reasons. So the vast majority of people that died here were buried in unmarked graves adjacent to the prison. Eventually that was planted over with trees and was used as a park, which was eventually known as tent land, where camping holidaymakers would come, and unknowingly they camped on this unmarked burial site for decades. So the quad itself, which was the main prison, was built for and by the Aboriginal prisoners, and it's estimated that about 21 people died in each one of those cells. Eventually that building was turned into resort accommodation, which was up and running for almost 100 years, until that ceased due to the recognition of the situation back in 2018. Thankfully, efforts are now put into place to recognise and acknowledge what happened here, not only for the people that were here, but also what it means for the families of the people who never left the island. So now this site is known as the Wodjumup Aboriginal Burial Ground, and it is now acknowledged, and the area is marked so people don't actually walk across that part of the island anymore. Yeah. This island here is famous for what National Geographic label the happiest animal on the planet, quokkas. So the island is covered with these fluffy, smiley little bouncing animals, which the original Dutch explorers that landed here thought were big rats. And that's why Vlaming named this place Rottnest Island. So obviously they're not rats. And in fact, quokka is the traditional Noongar name for these little animals. So there's a huge colony of them on the island, but when the sea levels rose about 7,000 years ago, it fragmented the community. So there are still quokkas on the mainland, but they're just not as easily found. Today we're going to climb a tree, and not just any tree. This is the tallest fire lookout tree on the planet. This is the bicentennial tree near Pemberton in Western Australia. So So this tree has 165 pegs and the lookout stands at about 75 meters off the ground. Back through the 30s to the 50s, this was the best way to actually look out for fires in these high carry forests. So this one was built in 1988, but this one here, the Gloucester tree, was one of the original 8 that were constructed and used between 1937 and 1952. And basically there was no way of constructing anything higher than the trees, so they used the trees themselves. But they're not used so much as lookouts anymore, they're primarily for tourism and adventure. Yeah. Sensitivity warning on this next clip. It relates to topics regarding unmarked Aboriginal burial grounds and the imprisonment of traditional peoples. So this island here has a dark history. It's commonly known as Rottnest Island, but to the Noongar people of southwest Western Australia, it's known as Wodjumup, which means the island of the spirits. This place only became an island about 7,000 years ago. There is evidence of occupation and artifacts that have been found out here dating back about 30,000 years. So this was seen as a place of great spiritual connection and essentially a stepping stone to the next life down on the west end of the island. So when European settlement came into this area, a colony was set up at what was known as the Swan River Settlement, which is modern day Fremantle, and eventually issues between two very different legal systems and cultures ensued. In 1839, it was officially declared that Wodjumup here was going to become the site of a large Aboriginal prison, which it was used as for almost 100 years. All of the old buildings on the island were actually built by those prisoners. During the course of the life of imprisonment here, around about 3,700 Aboriginal men and boys spent time on the island, and about 10% of those never left the island, dying for a variety of different reasons. So the vast majority of people that died here were buried in unmarked graves adjacent to the prison. Eventually that was planted over with trees and was used as a park, which was eventually known as tent land, where camping holidaymakers would come, and unknowingly they camped on this unmarked burial site for decades. So the quad itself, which was the main prison, was built for and by the Aboriginal prisoners, and it's estimated that at least 7 people died in each one of those cells. Eventually that building was turned into resort accommodation, which was up and running for almost 100 years, until that ceased due to the recognition of the situation back in 2018. Thankfully, efforts are now put into place to recognise and acknowledge what happened here, not only for the people that were here, but also what it means for the families of the people who never left the island. So now this site is known as the Wodjumup Aboriginal Burial Ground, and it is now acknowledged, and the area is marked so people don't actually walk across that part of the island anymore. Yeah. This here is one of the longest walking trails in Australia. It's called the Bibbulmun Track, and it stretches all the way from Albany to Perth in Western Australia. The track is just over 1,000 kilometres long, and it's supposed to take about 6 to 8 weeks to complete, going through some of the most scenic wilderness in this part of the world. If you're interested in seeing what's on the actual trail itself, go and check out a guy called Cam Bostock. He's a content creator, and he just completed the whole track with a friend of his in just 3 weeks. Yeah, and it's worth having a look at their adventures, because it's a beautiful part of the world. A lot of people say these rivers look like cappuccinos, and they kind of do. And there's 2 factors at play here. There's what makes the white foam, and there's what makes the rivers brown. And both of them come down to the plants in the area. The thing that makes the foam is a chemical compound called saponin. What's saponin? That protects the plant from bacterial and fungi infection. So it's kind of like soap. Yeah, and the thing that makes the rivers brown is tannin from the leaves. So essentially it's like tea. So both these factors can lead people to think that these rivers are dirty, but both of these factors actually make the rivers extra clean. Yeah, true story. Another beautiful thing about the southwest of Australia. Cappuccino rivers. Yeah. All right, just want to show you a bobtail skink quickly. Hey buddy, hey buddy, that's it. He's a little feisty one. All right, I won't grab him. Yeah, but there you go, bit of wildlife for you. Get off the road, mate. Come on, off the road. All right, just want to show you a bobtail skink quickly. Hey buddy, hey buddy. That's it. He's a little feisty one. All right, I won't grab him. Yeah, but there you go, bit of wildlife for you. Get off the road, mate. Come on, off the road. If you're ever lucky enough to come into the southwest of Australia, everyone is going to tell you to check out the Karri forests. Everyone. And what are the Karri forests? these are the karri forests. Now these remind me a lot of my favourite eucalypt, which is Eucalyptus regnans, or the mountain ash, which is endemic to the southeast of Australia. And very similar to that, these karri trees are endemic to the southwest of Australia. They have a very similar look and a very similar height. Karri trees being the third tallest tree on the planet, and mountain ash being the second tallest tree on the planet. But unlike the mountain ash, I don't think these guys are hallucinogenic. But nonetheless, they are amazing and they are beautiful, and I can understand why everyone has been telling me to get into these forests. Just a little bit of nerdy plant stuff here. Warning. In Australia, we have a grass tree species called Xanthorrhea. Now, there's a couple of dozen different types of Xanthorrhea, and they look very much like this. So I assumed these were Xanthorrheas. But it turns out these guys are their own genus, and there's only one species in that genus. This is called Kingia australis, and it's only found through this part of Australia. Quite nerdy, but interesting nonetheless. Cool stuff. So the same forces that created the Himalayas created this mountain range out here. This is the Stirling Range in Western Australia. So it's quite well known that the subcontinent of India pushing into Asia created the Himalayas. And that happened about 50 million years ago. But these peaks out here were pushed up when the Mawson Craton collided with the West Australian Craton about 1.2 billion years ago. In fact, that orogenic activity created most of the geological features in this part of Western Australia, right through the coast, all the way up here to the Stirling Ranges. Yeah, and if you're wondering what this is, you've been sitting in a tree. Ta-da! Look at this. I didn't even know these things existed until yesterday. This is a tingle tree, and that is a tingle tree. There's three kinds of tingle trees, tinglewoods. They're only found around Walpole in Western Australia. So it's a very, very small population. And they're one of the most interesting and beautiful trees I've ever seen. Yeah, so they exist. Red tingle, yellow tingle, and there's another tingle. Tingle trees. Tinglewood. And because they're generally sandstone and metasediments, it's quite unusual that they're actually still standing. And the only reason they are still standing is because they were pushed up again when Antarctica broke away from Australia about 40 million years ago. We need a video on Albany. Okay. All right, the whole reason Albany was founded was literally to keep the French out of Australia. In 1826, a military crew was sent from New South Wales to Albany, or the then Fredericktown, literally to let the French who were sniffing through that part of the coast know that the entire continent of New Holland had been settled by the British Empire. As you can see, they were naming far too many things in French and not enough things ending with up. Nice town, by the way. It's a super quick, almost science session with Sid. Just over 1 billion years ago, Antarctica crashed into Australia. Boom! Creating these rocks, and these rocks, and these rocks, and these rocks. And then about 1 billion years later, it snapped off, creating this beach, and this beach, and this beach. Yeah, geology. Woo! Yes, it's good to see Mr. Ramsey on the tour. To celebrate, I'll show you my new favourite lunch snack. Dalmatis in a can. Oh yeah. Actually really good. It's my new favourite thing. Whoa, the gloves are gone. Yes, it's good to see Mr. Ramsey on the tour. To celebrate, I'll show you my new favourite lunch snack. Dalmatis in a can. Oh yeah. Actually really good. It's my new favourite thing. You want everyone to be happy around you. You want everyone to... It's a super quick, almost science session with Sid. Just over 1 billion years ago, Antarctica crashed into Australia. Boom! Creating these rocks, and these rocks, and these rocks, and these rocks. And then about 1 billion years later, it snapped off, creating this beach, and this beach, and this beach. Yeah, geology. Woo! But at the time, US President Jimmy Carter did call the Balladonia Hotel personally to apologise for the incident. In 1979, space junk from NASA's Skylab was returning back into our atmosphere. It was estimated that the debris was going to hit somewhere around South Africa, but it went wildly off course and ended up crashing through this area here, between Esperance and Balladonia. Just for shits and gigs, the Esperance Shire decided to lay a $400 littering fine onto NASA, which they never paid, but eventually was paid by a radio host in California back in 2009. So what's the most boring road in your country? This one here has a reputation for being the longest and most boring road we have in Australia. That's why the Nullarbor here is commonly referred to as the Nullaboring. And this little stretch here is the longest, straightest stretch of tarmac in Australia. Personally, I like it. I think it's kind of cool. You see a lot of this and this and this, obviously. But you also get to see a bit of this and this and this. I think it's cool. Nullarbor. Here we go. It's a bit hard to tell with the naked eye, but we are standing on a border right here. In order to see this border, let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is a geological map, and you can see where we are, and we're about to get onto that blue stuff. That is the world's biggest chunk of limestone. Geological maps are usually quite coloured because of all the different rocks involved, but as you can see, this is just one big blue chunk. Basically covers the entire Nullarbor, and it's all a geological story about our very close relationship with Antarctica. Yeah, limestone heaven, yay. So it doesn't matter if you're from Manjinup or if you're from Milwaukee, there's a bit of homework attached to this clip. So when I came into the region of Perth in Noongar country, I very quickly realised that nearly every place, nearly every road, nearly every creek ended with the letters UP. Every town was up, 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 up. I quickly learnt that up meant place of in Noongar language. Place of possums, place of brown snakes, place of male kangaroos, place of rain. For your homework, should you choose to accept it, if you are from any part of the world that has a traditional First Nations name attached to it, find out what it actually means and let me know in the comments. So sometimes in Australia, our highways become runways. So these are dotted around the country in very remote locations on the main highways, essentially as a landing strip for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, in case they need to come out to medical emergencies in remote places like this, either on the cattle stations or because of traffic incidents. But it has to be flat, it has to be straight, it has to be at least 1.3 kilometres long. And then you've got yourself a highway runway. This is the longest golf course on the planet, stretching for about 1,365 kilometres or 800 miles. This 18-hole par 72 golf course stretches all the way from Kalgoorlie in Western Australia across the Nullarbor to Ceduna in South Australia. Taking several days to complete, it's highly recommended that between holes that you use your vehicle. Yeah. More of a mini golf kind of guy myself. So there's caves and tunnels all through the Nullarbor. This is one of them. And this stretches in there for a little bit over 6 kilometres. Yeah, how about no? Feels like the end of the world here, and I like it. This is one of the coolest places in Australia, just to get an understanding of the vastness of space and time, basically. This is where Antarctica snapped off from Australia. We're getting into an area called the Great Australian Bight. And this reminds me of one of those love lockets that you have two halves of. Antarctica was basically perfectly nestled into this area through here. But now it is a few thousand kilometres that way. Nullaboring? I don't think so. We're hiding down here and then pop, pop, hello. This may very well be the world's smallest continental time zone. Just here. But we have now entered Australian Western Central Time Zone, which is a tiny sliver of land on the east part of Western Australia that accommodates a population of about 110 people. And it's basically a 45-minute difference between here and the rest of Western Australia. But in the meantime, South Australia. What would you want to go there for? Not only have we crossed into a new state, we have also crossed onto a new craton. The Gawler Craton. Coming along the highway, this is the first place in South Australia where the Gawler Craton is actually exposed. What is a craton? They are the oldest parts of the Earth. So the plains surrounding us are just a couple of million years old, but these rocks here are at least 2.5 billion years old. In fact, this is Antarctica, and this is a piece of Antarctica that got lodged into Australia and then snapped off when Australia began to move north. Fascinating stuff. I'm collecting 3 little bits of the Gawler Craton, aka ancient Antarctica. If you are a complete rock nerd and you want a little piece of this ancient history, let me know what your favourite video is and why, and I'll send 3 little rocks out to people around the world. Pildappa, one of many wave rocks. One of many wave rocks, one of many wave rocks, one of many wave rocks. Done. My content gets better all the time. Now, on my tours, I used to have a lot of Germans. I was driving up the Stewart Highway on a desert tour, talking to the group about how smart corellas are and how they actually get their food. You hear these birds? They're called corellas. About 20 seconds later, the German guy sitting behind me leaned forward, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sid, I did not know you have gorillas in Australia." Yeah, but no, corellas. Corellas. Not gorillas. We've just ridden almost 2,000 kilometers in 3 days, and I'm pooped. Why? A, Nullarbor. B, we've been running away from this storm. And C, we're aiming to get into these hills. So in a couple of hours, I'll be in the Flinders Ranges, and then I get to share something very special with you. So we're done with the Nullarbor. Next chapter. So this is National Highway 1. Zoom and zoom. And this is the world's longest national highway. It circumnavigates the entire continent of Australia. And it's about 14,500 kilometers long. If you are going to cross the whole country, you will do more than that. We've already covered about 22,000 kilometers. Oh yeah, it's a big country. Few other places in Australia do whatever this place does to my head. Feels like the end of the world here. And I like it.
Yeah, in German we call this die Gefahrenzone. And in Germany we would have a sign here saying it's too dangerous. But yeah, die Gefahrenzone.
Where am I? This city is the reason we don't have Burger King in Australia. This city is the only one in the world where a dairy product outsells Coca-Cola. This was the first city in the world to have public parks. This city is essentially powered by Elon Musk. This city is renowned for these buildings, but per capita, statistically speaking, there's actually more of these buildings. This city has the third most expensive building in the world. This is also the only city in Australia where a pint isn't a pint. And this was the only city in Australia to be settled by free settlers. And which city is it? This is Australia's biggest town, Radelaide. And yeah, distinct lack of serial killers. More of a mini golf kind of guy myself. This is the longest golf course on the planet, stretching for about 1,365 kilometers or 800 miles. This 18-hole par 72 golf course stretches all the way from Kalgoorlie in Western Australia, across the Nullarbor to Ceduna in South Australia. Taking several days to complete, it's highly recommended that between holes that you use your vehicle. Yeah. I'm Sid, that's Foo, that's Mud, and we're gonna get some yabbies. So on this 6-month lap around Australia, many people have been asking me where my favourite spot is, where the most beautiful places are. And I'm going to give you an answer now that most people won't be expecting. But this place here has been one of the most beautiful places I've been to. And not necessarily because of the amazing environment, but because this is where I have so many amazing memories from being on tour with backpackers for 10 years. This is where I used to park the bus, and this is where we used to have parties. And that's the creek where we used to find scorpions. This is where we'd have outdoor parties. The kitchen is where we'd have big cook-ups, and where Danish girls would always feel compelled to give me ponytails for some reason. And this is the fireplace that Chris fell into naked. So what I'm getting at is, you can be the most beautiful place in the world, but unless you actually have the memories and the connections and the experiences with other people, it just doesn't mean as much. Yeah, anyway, Stony Creek, Wilmington, good memories. Check it out. So a couple of weeks ago I showed you the Bibbulmun track, third longest walking track in Australia. This is the second longest walking track in Australia. This is the Hyson Trail, going from Parachilna up in the northern Flinders Ranges all the way down to Cape Jervis near Kangaroo Island. At about 1,200 kilometres long, probably the most in-depth way to see the Flinders Ranges. It's not as busy as the Bibbulmun, that's for sure. That is all. Next up, Finn the Human. So it is, bro. So Elon Musk won a $50 million bet, and now the city of Adelaide is powered by Tesla, kinda. Back in 2016-17, South Australia was having massive problems with their electrical grid, so much so that it became blaringly obvious that something needed to be done. So Australian techie Mike Cannon-Brooks ended up contacting Elon Musk directly and basically saying, Elon, I bet you $50 million that you can't fix the energy problems in South Australia. So Elon stepped up and said, I will go you one better. I will have the whole thing done in 100 days and under budget, or I will do it all for free. So the game was on. And in true Elon Musk style, he built the world's biggest battery within 100 days and under budget. And since that day, South Australia has had no issues with their electrical grid whatsoever. And in turn, Mike Cannon-Brooks ended up saying that it was the best bet that he's ever lost. Elon Musk. Adelaide, here we are. I've got to go. This is one of the most amazing geological formations on the planet. Story time. A little bit over 1 billion years ago, the world was a very different place. Right through this part of Australia, we were actually attached to North America. As North America began to move away from Australia about 1 billion years ago, I think I'm going to need 2 hands for this. So those 2 continents moving apart basically created what we call a rift valley. So a rift valley is actually being formed in Africa right now because the continent is splitting in 2. The world is still doing what it used to do billions of years ago. Back to the story. So this massive rift valley formed. It was basically a big trench in the Earth's surface. And when this trench opened up, it meant that all of this sediment, sand, mud, clay, silt, could be washed into this valley. So as all the layers are washing into this rift complex, they're making layers and layers and layers and layers. Because these layers were undisturbed, it was essentially as if the Earth was keeping a very detailed diary for about 300 million years. So eventually when this rift valley filled up, all of the weight, pressure and heat essentially solidified all of that sediment into rock. Now we skip forward in time a little bit till about 500 million years ago. Then we had impact coming from the west, from the Gawler Craton, which basically squeezed all of that rock up into the air, creating this mountain range here. This is the Flinders Ranges. And this range runs all the way from the desert all the way down to the coast. In fact, this range was formed when Antarctica was still attached to Australia. So in reality, there is a bit of the Flinders Ranges in Antarctica as well. Geologically, it was the Adelaide Geosyncline. Now it's been rebranded and it's known as the Adelaidean Rift Complex. What makes this unique? First of all, in certain parts of the range, those layers had been pushed up vertically perfectly, and you can drive through Bratchina Gorge and it's literally like driving through time. And through that 300 million year period, you get to witness everything from meteorite crashes to glaciation events to the creation of complex life on planet Earth. But further up in the range, the forces were so strong it actually squeezed the basement rocks up to the Earth's surface. And these basement rocks were extremely hot and radioactive, creating a huge nuclear-powered geothermal system, which ran for about 100 million years. So luckily for us, eventually that geothermal system was fossilized underneath the Earth's surface and eventually uplifted, creating Mount Painter and Mount G up at Argyle in Andermatt country. And that nuclear-powered geothermal system is actually still active. There's a hot spring called Parallana Hot Spring, which is actually heated by radioactive decay. Last time I checked in, there was about 20 potential World Heritage UNESCO sites being put into place in the Northern Flinders Ranges. So that's how important it is. Especially up in the northern part of the range, it is essentially like a geo-Disney. It doesn't get better than this in terms of studying rocks. Now, I could literally talk about this for hours. In fact, I used to. It was my job. But I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to sign off there by saying, yeah, factoids. You want them? I got them. After the Nile and the Amazon rivers, this is the longest navigable river on the planet. Yeah, on the planet. And it's the longest river in Australia. This is the Murray River. It's big. It's about 2,500 kilometres long. It runs through 3 states, forms most of the border between New South Wales and Victoria. It supplies water to about 1.5 million homes. It has the 3rd biggest water catchment in the world. What else? The mouth of the river is constantly being dredged to keep it open, and it even has its own flag. In fact, it has 3 of them. Yeah, the Murray. So yes, I'll show you a little bit more bush medicine that we have in Australia. Here in Nurrunjeri country, on the Coorong in South Australia, this plant here is known as yulkari, commonly known as old man's beard. There's a few old man beards around the world, but this specific one is Clematis microphylla, just in case you're wondering. Why do they call it old man's beard? We'll never know. And it acts as a rubefacient, which sounds fancy, but it basically means make red. From what I understand, it dilates the capillaries, which increases the blood circulation. So it heats up the skin and acts in a similar way to products like Deep Heat. So you can crush the leaves and apply it directly to the skin, just for a few minutes because it will go quite red. Or as a more general and subtle tonic, you can get the leaves, mix them with water and steam them, have a bath in that, and it's good for general arthritis. It's also edible as well. The leaves aren't edible, but they are very, very spicy, but you can actually dig the roots up. You can eat them raw, but apparently if you cook them, turn them into a dough, it's a much better food source. Yeah, old man's beard. Big face. Not you, not me, this thing here. So continuing with the bush medicine, I'm going to introduce you to this little fella here. If you've been to the south or the east of Australia in the coastal areas, you would have seen this plant for sure. Here in Nurrunjeri country, it is known as Nunangi. excuse the pronunciation. So the actual leaves are edible. You can eat them raw or you can roast them. When it is fruiting, you can eat the fruits. They've been compared to like salty strawberries or kiwis or apples, little salty apples. They have also been known to have a laxative effect, so be careful with that one. Yeah. And these leaves have similar properties to aloe vera. So you can use this as a throat gargle for minor infections. You can also use it to soothe burns and stings from insects. Yeah, there you go. Pig face.
Salty!
Wow, it's like it peels any lubricant out of your mouth. Wow. Yep, moving on. Any plants that I talk about, if you are going to go out and try them in one way or another, please make sure that you identify whatever it is that you're planning on rubbing on your skin or gargling or eating. I accept no responsibility for your actions in the wilderness. Yeah. Unless you're on my tour, and then like I am legally responsible for you. Yeah. All right, happy foraging. So this is the result of the most violent volcanic eruption to occur in Australia's modern history. This is the Mar crater at Mount Gambier in South Australia. It's estimated that it had a volcanic eruptivity index of 4, meaning it was about the same as the one that went off in Iceland back in 2010. And why was this one so explosive? Because the water you see down here, that is the level of the water table. So as the magma came up through about 14 different vents, it mixed with the water, and that created a huge steam-powered explosion. Because it erupted 5,000 years ago, geologically speaking, it is still classified as active. And if it did go off again, which it very well may, it's believed that the local residents would have about 48 hours notice, and the potential volcanic debris field would look something like this. So we still do have 2 active volcanoes in Australia. They are dormant, but they are active. Boom. So they say volcanoes are the only thing not trying to kill Australians, but time will tell. Time will tell. Do you like mushrooms? Do you like ghosts? We have ghost mushrooms here. This is Ghost Mushroom Lane. And throughout different parts of Australia, we have these ghost mushrooms that literally glow in the dark. It's the complete opposite end of the year in terms of the season for them, so I can't show them to you, but here's a picture, and here's a picture, and yeah, it's a thing. Omphalitus nidiformis for my mycology friends. Glow-in-the-dark mushrooms. Do not eat them. If you ever find them, don't eat them. Yeah, that's trouble. That's trouble. This is awesome. What do you get when you combine an extensive limestone karst system with one of the biggest volcanic fields in the world? You get a landscape that is jam-packed full of cool. So right throughout this region near the border of South Australia and Victoria is an area riddled with beautiful geological formations. For example, sinkholes like this, even sinkholes like this, caves like this, volcanoes like this, and this. And in my opinion, one of the most beautiful coastlines on the planet. And I could literally do 100 videos just in this area. Yeah, but we'll start with this one. Volcano! This here was the very last volcano to erupt in Australia. This is Mount Shank, and it is also the very last volcano in the longest continental chain of volcanic activity found anywhere on the planet. So this erupted about 5,000 years ago, meaning that much like Mount Gambier, this is still classified as active. And this is a volcanic chain that we've already touched on in this video in Victoria and this video in Queensland. And it's estimated that the hotspot has now moved out to sea. Yeah, we may find out. Who loves volcanoes? Everyone loves volcanoes. So the Indigenous peoples of Australia were one of, if not the best storytellers on the planet. Now, from a purely scientific point of view, these stories are absolutely priceless. Because these local groups had been here for tens of thousands of years, these creation stories that were passed on still have the stories related to volcanic eruptions like this, and even stories dating back to when it was possible to actually walk from Victoria to Tasmania via the land bridge. Generally, these stories are only held in the rocks, but we're lucky enough here in Australia to have a culture and an oral tradition that was literally there in person to see these things happening. Amazing, amazing. Yeah. So I just pulled up here to talk about this place, and then I realized this guy was right above me. So let's talk about koalas. What do we talk about, buddy? Apparently that's what we're going to talk about. That's what a koala sounds like. First of all, not bears. They're marsupials. They have a pouch. And apart from humans and primates, these guys are the only other animal to actually have fingerprints. They've got extra junk in the trunk to make sure that they're comfortable doing stuff like that. The closest relative is the wombat, funnily enough. They've got one of the smallest brain sizes compared to their skull and their body. Giving me the greasiest looks. And baby koalas are called joeys. Cute AF. This is what a koala looks like in Mike Mullard's A to Z of Australian animals. They only eat eucalyptus. Out of the hundreds of species of eucalyptus, it's only a couple of dozen that they will actually eat. Quite territorial. That's the noise that you heard before. Yeah, I would love to pet him, but I'm sure he'll try to scratch my face off. Won't ya? Yeah. So, yeah, koalas. Is this Reptile? Yeah. What specials have you got today? Yeah, cool. Snakes. And you deliver? Yeah, cool. See you when you get here. All right, cheers. Oh, that was quick. G'day, mate. So that's all snakes?
Yeah, well, snakes and a few lizards. Spotted python. Go for life. Yeah, I'll probably put him away. Natasha got her name because she ate her last 2 boyfriends.
Oh.
Second biggest snake in the country.
What's his name?
Paddle Pop.
Paddle Pop.
The rainbow serpent story is affiliated with different snakes in different parts of the country.
Mm.
But Narnham Land was meant to be John Stoney. Had her stinging him so that she doesn't eat him. He passed away last year, I think. So we've got a green tree frog called a white's tree frog that in Latin's a blue tree frog. I've got to use him on Tuesday. I'm doing venomous snake safety training for the local council. So yeah, 2/3 of Australian snake bites are this species. His goal is to end me. Bongo, so much prettier. We say less prone, and he's still on par with like the black mamba. Most people don't know what a dugite is. Sonala's a king brown or a mulga. Wow. She's in the black snake family, so if you're bitten by her, you need black snake anti-venom. It's not necessarily that black snakes are nicer, they're just heavier bodied. Bloody rowdy's going on.
Rowdy, yeah. See you, Rowdy.
Yeah.
See you, mate. So it's not really Reptile. It's Nick from Wicked Wildlife. He took the time to come to me at my campsite and yeah, bring some of his little friends out here. So if you like those kind of critters, go and check out his TikTok page. He goes live every week with those animals. Yeah, cool. TikTok community, beautiful thing. So this is quite a simple geological story, and it's one that created something, yeah, quite beautiful. Between 1 and 2 million years ago, a volcano erupted just downstream. Now the surge of lava was so strong that instead of just following the actual river course, the lava built up and began to flow upstream until it solidified in the actual waterway. So as the river kept on flowing down, eventually it began eating away at the softer rocks underneath that layer of basalt. So the waterfall that you see over here was most probably down here. So in terms of geology, this is quite a simple process. Yeah, but like most rocks, it's good to know to have an even deeper appreciation for the beauty within the landscapes. Yeah, Wannon Falls. Wannon Falls. I know you're getting to know me as the months go on, but I want you to understand my view on advertising and marketing. The view I share on this subject is very similar to a man called Bill Hicks. I won't go into that in detail, but basically, I'm not a big fan of fake advertising, if you know what I mean. Eventually, I'm going to receive money to promote specific products, like these things here. Any product that I'm not familiar with, a couple of months down the track, I will let you know whether or not it is actually a good quality product. Now, on my trip around Australia, I've gone through 6 pairs of sunglasses. Yeah. So the probability of sunglasses living with Sid for a long period of time is very small. So I've been using these for about a month. So far, so good. Now there's a company called Quality. They sent me a couple of pairs of sunglasses. One pair of sunglasses, which I actually preferred, didn't really have the shape that fitted my head. So when I received these, I was in Esperance and I was being looked after by a guy called Paul. Now he took a massive liking to those sunglasses and they actually suited his head more than mine. So I gave them to Paul. So I kept these ones. I will check back and I will let you know whether they actually survived. And a shout out to the guys at Quality, because they've been the most professional and friendly people that I've actually dealt with in terms of people wanting me to promote their products. Yeah, so yeah, that's it for now. Boo-boo! What does that look like? This thing here looks like a petrified palm tree trunk, which is one of the reasons it's called a petrified forest. But in reality, it's not a petrified forest at all. And that was the original theory. But as time went on and we began to understand geology a little bit better, we worked out that these are actually called solution pipes. I've had a few solution pipes in my time. So the general understanding is that water would collect in these little puddles in the sand, and as the water seeped down into the sand, it would bring with it a whole bunch of minerals, and that would essentially cement these limestone tubes into place. Yeah, so the ones through here are maybe 2, 3, 4 meters high, but further down the coast you can get some that are up to 20 meters high. Solution pipes. Yeah. So I've literally been living on a motorbike for the last 6 months. And people want to know how it is possible. So in the next couple of clips, I'm going to introduce you to the gear that I use and the motorbike itself to give you an idea of what is needed to live a life on the road. So bike life definitely ain't van life, that's for sure. I think there's a really important lesson in this for us at the moment because the world is changing. It always has and it always will. Let me tell you a little story about the Gondwana people of southwest Victoria in Australia. Many thousands of years ago, they were living in a landscape that they knew and understood very, very well. And then overnight, everything changed. Boom. Fire and brimstone. Everything they knew and loved and had relied on to live began to disappear as it was engulfed by the volcanic flows of Budge Bim. But luckily they had the stories of the old people and they knew and understood that change was nature's delight. And as long as they had each other, they knew that they could learn to adapt to the new situation. Eventually, after many months and years, a new landscape and a new environment began to take hold. New waterways formed, new animals moved in, and new plants began to grow. They were able to learn the new ways of life and how to use the new resources to their advantage. And eventually through this process, they would create a new system that would actually become world-renowned thousands of years later. Yeah. So yourself and many others have been asking me this question, so let me introduce you to Maxine Black over here. She is a somewhat customized Suzuki V-Strom 650 from 2008. And these bikes are renowned for having one of the most bulletproof engines out there. So to buy a relatively cheap bike and then do a 6-month, 25,000 kilometre trip right around Australia, what I have put her through, especially coming through the Savannah Way, I have not had one problem with her at all. What more could you want? For something that is so comfortable on the highway and can go off-road and is reliable, really reliable, you can't fault Suzuki V-Strom or V-Strom. Yeah, so that's what I'm riding. Suzuki! So I don't really feel like talking about this at the moment. It's just not the mood that I'm in, but I'm here and I think it's a very important thing to talk about. So first of all, that. Second of all, sensitivity warning, because I'm going to be covering topics that relate to genocide and massacres. And thirdly, I'm not going to be going into much detail about it at all. I just want to touch on the topic and bring light to the fact that it did happen. I just want to tell you a little bit about something called the Kununurra War, which is basically a conflict that ensued between the traditional peoples of this part of southwest Victoria, primarily the Gondwana, and the European settlers who would come into the area. And by all accounts, this is where the conflict started, right here on this beach, which is now known as the Convincing Ground. And the conflict started after a whale washed up on this beach here, and the argument basically related to who owned that whale. So this began the Kununurra War, which raged for about 20 years, right through the coast here and further up north, up into Jabberjali country. There aren't many official records and accounts of exactly what happened. Most of the details have been passed down orally through the traditional peoples, but the quotations we have from the people that were here have come from either letters that were sent from here back to England and Ireland, or in the diaries of the local people like the Henty brothers. And there's still a lot of places that have the names that were given after these conflicts happened in certain places like Bay of Martyrs, Massacre Bay, and the Convincing Ground, to name a few. There's some interesting and graphic details about what happened during the Kununurra War. It's quite a good article on Wikipedia that goes into a lot of detail about the different conflicts. But at the end of the day, in terms of numbers, after this 20-year conflict, there ended up being about 80 fatalities for the European settlers. And it's estimated that the local Gondwana population, they were reduced from about 7,000 people down to about 452 people. Now that we're getting back into my area where I grew up, I've got a lot more experience and understanding and knowledge about what has happened right through this part of the world. And that's just something that I wanted to bring to light. Yeah, it's good to understand history, especially if you are from this area. It's really good to understand what did happen here a couple of hundred years ago. Yeah. Check this out, look behind you. So this is one of the bioduct lava tubes. And this is such a little microclimate that up here we basically have dry fields. And in here we have 62 species of moss and 21 species of fern. Just in this like tiny little area. So these are the bioduct caves, which was caused from a lava flow that came out of this volcano here. I give you guys a lot of information and I take you to a lot of beautiful places. But it's little things like this that make me miss tour guiding, because you just need to be here. Yeah. Anyway, off into the darkness. No. Oi. Oh, you son of a bitch. Champion. Dick. This is another lava tube. Zoom. But in this one, you can actually see, like, as the lava has drained out of the tube, you can see where it's all like dripped off the ceiling and dripped down the walls, and it's really cool. Really cool. This is all basalt. Basalt, like, look at it, look at it. It's basically just solidified lava. And so basalt comes, yeah, from deeper within the earth. It's something like granite. Granite will be like a melting of the crust. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. Yeah, I want to take you into a dark cave for a minute. There's a moss in here, but it's almost like it's bioluminescent, and it's kind of cool. I'll show you. Yeah, look at that. And that. I'm assuming that the small parts of moss are actually perfectly edged towards that hole, creating a mirror effect. But either way, it's a cool thing. Look at this, it's so cool. It's another volcano. Wait, this is my favorite one in Victoria, possibly Australia. This is Tower Hill, traditionally known in Gundwana language as Koroit, which is now the name of the local Irish town just behind us. Koroit. So much like Budge Bim, this was another natural disaster that the Gundwana had to deal with. So the middle section isn't just the volcano, the entire crater is the volcano. And then the island in the middle is a successive eruption that went off thousands of years after the first eruption. The volcanic ash released from the initial eruption is found for kilometers around the area. And this is what is known as a giant nested maar, which is unique and makes it of international geological significance. Yeah, that's Tower Hill, Koroit. So this was actually Victoria's first national park, which didn't stop people from completely devastating the place. In fact, by the 1950s, the whole area was pretty much cleared. They ended up using a painting that was painted back in 1855 to determine which native plants were actually here originally. Then from the 1960s to the 1980s, they essentially replanted the entire park with about 25,000 plants. So now Tower Hill is a state game reserve, and it is packed full of native flora and fauna. Oi. Oh, you son of a... A couple of days ago I was talking about fossilized trees that weren't really fossilized trees, but these here pretty much are fossilized trees, mostly. So these are essentially fossilized root systems of old shrubs and plants that grew along the dunes, and the general understanding is as the tree began to decompose, the root system would get replaced with calcium or calcrete. Yeah, and that's what we have right through here. So unlike the famous petrified wood, which is really quite a dense structure, these are extremely fragile, and these run right through the coast. So you can see here where the root has decomposed, it's been replaced with that calcium tube. Yeah, very cool. I love this coast so much. So what do you think's the most photographed rock formation in Australia? Everyone's gonna say Uluru, but I'm gonna tell you it's this rock that I'm standing on right here. This is what we call Port Campbell limestone, and this makes up the bulk of the shipwreck coast, or the limestone coast that is on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. This rock mass here has basically created the geological formations that make up the 12 Apostles, London Bridge, Lockhart Gorge, and all the other famous sites along this part of the Ocean Road. So what you see here used to be the ocean floor, many kilometres out this way, that formed in the rift between Australia and Antarctica. And in terms of Australian geology, this is all relatively quite young, forming around about 14 million years ago. And eventually, as Australia has been moving north, that ocean floor has been lifted up, and that has created the vast majority of this part of the coastline. All this limestone is basically a layer cake of all of the marine life and sand that was floating around in the ocean out here many millions of years ago. And this is one of the most delicious looking geological formations I've ever seen. To be honest, it all looks a bit like cake. Lots of people have died out here. Let's start with that. So this is known as the Shipwreck Coast, and for good reason. So during the 18 and the 1900s, over the period of about 100 years, there was about 650 shipwrecks on the Victorian coastline, and most of them occurred in this area just here, more or less covering the western half of the Great Ocean Road. And Matthew Flinders, the first captain to actually circumnavigate the entire continent of Australia, when he saw this coastline, and this is a man that had travelled around the world. To paraphrase, he said this is by far the scariest coastline he's ever seen in his life. So it's a combination of the seas, the coasts, and it's a combination of all of these rock formations that are sitting just beneath the water's surface out here. Yeah, Shipwreck Coast. It might have been hell on earth for a lot of people, but for a lot of people these days, it's heaven. So this is hands down one of my favourite places on the planet. These are the Otways, which are in the middle of the Great Ocean Road. And this is like, it feels like you're on a Jurassic Island. Now, I've already done heaps of videos from the Otways back at the start of the year. Yeah, and it's always been my dream to have a property in the Otways. So this place is a very special place for me. And it is, as I've said before, it's basically my natural habitat. This road here is one of the most dangerous, one of the most beautiful, and one of the most famous roads in the world. This is the Great Ocean Road in Victoria, Australia, and it's also counted as the world's biggest war memorial because the whole thing was built in the 12 years after the First World War, built solely by returned servicemen and then dedicated to those that didn't make it back from the war. Officially stretching for 243 kilometres from here in Torquay right through to Allansford near Warrnambool. And the road itself is broken into 3 sections. You have the Surf Coast, you have the Otways, and you have the Shipwreck Coast. And I might be a bit biased because this is where I grew up, but this is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And almost being home means that this trip is almost over. So we've got 1 or 2 more stories to do, and then I'm going to give you a big wrap up about this trip we've been on for the last 7 months now. Oh yeah. This is the surf capital of Australia. True story. It is the birthplace of brands like Quicksilver and Rip Curl. It's the site of beaches like this and this and this. It houses the biggest surfing museum in the world. It hosts the longest running competitive surfing competition in the world, the Rip Curl Classic at Bells Beach. And on top of all of that, it is the official start of the Surf Coast section of the Great Ocean Road. This is Torquay. And this is pretty much the gateway to anything surf related in this part of the world. If you've seen the original Point Break, the real one, this is the Bells Beach that they were talking about.
Bells Beach, Australia. No way Bells is bigger than Waimea, bro. We'll be next year.
Odie believes the 50-year storm is coming next year.
50-year storm. What's that?
And we actually had that 50-year storm last year. True story.
That's kind of a legend.
No, it's real. It's absolutely real.
Have you ever?
Ever felt like this? Have strange things happen? Are you going round a twist?
It's recording. All right. Yeah, g'day. G'day. G'day, mate. Hi. A few months ago, I did a... What did I do? Think about it, Sid. Think about it. The numbers don't really matter so much. Drones. It's really annoying. I don't even know what I've said. And then lava went. So we've just done over 3, I don't know, pretty clouds today. Some flies, mother. Lake surprise, mother. Because to be honest, I was, ow! That's got no written all over it. Take 2. About 20 times the amount of water that is in the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Sydney Harbour. You're in a cave. Yeah, it's the local peoples and a bit of the history. Wind. Fucking. Anyway, that's cool. I like it. Pilbara. Ooh. I got a duck at my feet. Quack, quack. Quack, quack. Quack, quack. Quack, quack. Quack, quack. Regions on the planet. In the planet. One more, Sid. Use the brain. So instead of using spray plaster for an open wound, this is proving to be really difficult. I found myself in the cellar. No surprises there. Luckily, over the last 20 years, what the is his name? Sorry you can't get through. Why don't you leave your name and your number, and I'll get back to you. Oh, it's like the parties in Berlin. They must have aromatherapy parties in Berlin. Really smells horrible. Mate. Yeah, I know that's your tree. This is my tree. Hopefully that's enough, because I don't really know what I'm saying anymore. Yeah, action. Am I on? Yeah. Oh, we're on. Hey, look at me, I'm super white.
And in Germany, we would have a sign here saying it's too dangerous.
Yeah, this is called the Bibbleman. This is called the Bibbleman.
Basically, but here we are, wherever we are.
Hey, buddy.
Got a wave because I've got a motorbike and he's got a motorbike.
There are salt crystals. There are salt crystals. There are salt crystals. There are salt crystals. There are salt crystals still stuck in those. Sid.
Windy, 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 check, check, check.
One more, slightly more enthusiastic, perhaps. Might have to go and get a coffee in a minute. Captain's log. Relevance. Matter. How's that? How do you like them apples? Am I recording? Yep. Riddle me this. Whee. Play Bear Grylls. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, right next to a highway. Disinfect the wound and
prevent any further infection.
I'm trying to visualize it and I don't understand. Yeah, we're in red flag country. The superb fairy wren. Shut up. Talk about it later. It's a much older, it's a much... Ruff. Echo. Echo. This place is like an absolute time capsule. Shut the f up. I'm trying to record some quality content. All I want to do is make a zoom, 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 baby, zoom, zoom. Don't turn it up. The pride of Ballarat. Let's get in the light, man. Let's get in the light. It's all about the light. Can't even see myself around. If I could just have like one set of light. We've got pretty good lighting. Do we? Do we? Do we? And then at the end they officially dedicate it. You motherfucking choppers. Gotta take the good with the bad. Yeah, maybe that's too much for TikTok. Probably is. Probably is. Yeah, nice delivery, Sid. Yeah, moving on. So this video is directed at the nerds, it's directed at the adventurers, and it's directed at the nature lovers. For those of you that have been invested in this tour that we've just done around Australia, I've got to be careful. I'm about to step into a swamp. So we've completed our trip around the mainland, which has taken us about 7 months. It's taken us about 26,000 kilometers, and we've created about 200 videos in that process. And this was my first step into creating digital content after being a tour guide for 10 years. Next, we need to get to Tasmania. So I've put a GoFundMe together, which is linked in my bio at the top of the Linktree links, because all of my life savings have already been invested in the trip so far. And essentially we need less than $1 from less than 1% of the followers. So it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm hoping to get there at the start of February and spend about a month there. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to everything that we can do and create from here into the future. So this video is directed at for those of you that have been invested in this tour that we've just done around Australia. I've got to be careful. I'm about to step into a swamp. So we've completed our trip around the mainland, which has taken us about 7 months. It's about 26,000 kilometers, and we've created about 200 videos in that process. And this was my first step into creating digital content after being a tour guide for 10 years. Next, we need to get to Tasmania. So I've put a GoFundMe together, which is linked in my bio at the top of the Linktree links. And essentially we need less than $1 from less than 1% of the followers. So it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm hoping to get there at the start of February and spend about a month there. And I'm very much looking forward to everything that we can do and create from here into the future. Do you like travel? Well, I'm giving you the opportunity to travel from the comfort of your own home. So I've just done a 26,000 kilometer trip around Australia. I've shot about 200 TikTok videos, and I've put together an interactive map which summarizes pretty much that whole experience and adventure. So the interactive map is linked in my bio. So if you're ever bored and you feel like entertainment or you feel like education, have a look at that interactive map. Pretty much all the videos were actually shot in the locations where these little markers are. And it's all broken down into categories of old culture, new culture, geology, animals, SID stuff. So go and check it out and enjoy.